Okay, everybody, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I forget, obviously I'm sitting here without a jacket on. Anybody else who would like to take their jacket off? I'm not a hot-bodied person, so I can't stand it in this weather with jackets on. Anybody else who would like to take their jackets off is certainly welcome to, from my point of view. Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all members of the public, councillors, parish representatives and officers to the Planning Committee. This meeting is being streamed live and capable of repeated viewing. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction that on hearing the alarm, you should leave the building by the nearest marked exit and congregate at the assembly point in the car park. Also, please switch all electronic devices being used to silent. My name is Councillor Philip Minor and I am the Chair. On my left is the Vice Chair, Councillor Martin Cuthbert. Co-opted parish councillors are situated on the second row of benches. Members of the Planning Committee sit on the front row of benches, and only those councillors who are members of the Planning Committee are entitled to vote. For clarity, as we go through the agenda this evening, members of the committee will be permitted to speak for up to 5 minutes on each item. Any other members and parish councillors will be permitted a maximum of 3 minutes to speak with permission from the chair. May I remind members to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests and the nature of the interest at the beginning of the agenda item, and that in declaring a pecuniary interest you are required to leave the meeting when the item of business is considered. There should be no interaction from public areas at any time during the meeting. Members of the public invited to speak on tonight's applications will only be permitted to speak for 3 minutes if they have indicated to do so in advance as a representative or as an applicant agent on specific applications. Requests to speak should have been received by the clerk by yesterday at 4 o'clock. In the event of a disturbance such as calling out from the public area during the meeting, a request from the chair to be quiet will be given. But if the problem persists, any persons interrupting the meeting will be asked to leave. If necessary, the meeting will be adjourned to allow this to take place. So, agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. Mrs. Zoe Borman, have any apologies been received?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillors Gelderbloom, LaPlane and Baldock. Councillors Pound, Chinnery and Mayo are substituting. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Are there any declarations of interest to be made at this stage? Councillor Patel.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item number 4, I have to declare my non-registrable, non-pecuniary interest on it, so I'll be speaking on it, but I won't be taking part into debate or voting on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patel. Right. We move on to, we have no minutes because we did that a week ago. We now move on to planning applications and matters. The committee will now determine the planning applications and matters before it. Before we begin, may I just remind those members of the public who will be addressing the committee on planning applications tonight that your speech should be no longer than 3 minutes in duration and should relate purely to planning matters. When your name is called, will you please make your way to the chair provided. When you have completed your speech, the committee will debate the application and reach a decision. And there's some wording I'm going to read out in relation to local development plan sites. Some members of this council did not vote in favour of adopting the Brentwood Local Development Plan in March 2022 or were not members of the council at that time. I know some hold concerns about development allocations within the plan. The plan was adopted by the council, so it is the council's plan. But although no local development plan technically belongs to any one administration, it needs to be borne in mind that this one was drawn up under and adopted by a prior administration. And furthermore, that it is members of the current administration who are on record as having expressed concerns with aspects of it. Nonetheless, the Planning Committee is tasked with considering all applications against policies within the Council's local development plan and will do so on their own merits. So, we move to item 3, which is for land north of Shenfield, Chelmsford Road, Shenfield. This is a hybrid application. Full application for the construction of 142 residential dwellings, including affordable housing, open space, children's play area and landscaping, and an outline planning permission is also sought for the construction of a care home, use class C2, with reserved matters for appearance, layout, landscaping and all other matters in detail. This is application number 24/00051/FUL, and we have members need to have regard for, there was an addendum report which was circulated earlier on today giving an update on the status of the other RO3 parcels, because in between the printing of the agenda and tonight we've had developments obviously on the Crowd House parcel. The case officer is Miss Catherine Williams.
Good evening. There we go. Working. Good evening, everyone. I'm Catherine Williams, and I'm the consultant that's been assigned to assist Brentwood with determining the RO3 planning applications. I'm reporting a note that was circulated to members yesterday on the planning appeal made by Crowdace Homes, and that was in relation to land north of Shenfield, part of the same allocation, RO3, which was for 344 homes, including 38% affordable housing, land safeguarded for a two-form entry primary school and associated infrastructure. The appeal was allowed, and the cost of defending the appeal when members decided to refuse the application on the 10th of July 2024 was £140,953. This appeal decision is a material consideration when determining the next item being part of the same RO3 allocation. So the appeal is helpful in clarifying the inspector's view on density and building height. Higher density elements are acknowledged, particularly at gateway points, noting the design reflects current national policy priorities, which encourages higher densities in areas with access to sustainable transport. On height, the transition from the existing two-storey dwellings to proposed three-storey buildings has also been accepted by the inspector. The inspector accepts that the change in height is a balance between continuity and change. On design, the inspector was satisfied that the scheme responds to its context, is of a design that is high quality and reflective of its gateway situation, that the development is in compliance with policy RO3 of the Brentwood Local Plan, and there is no substantive evidence presented to undermine this conclusion. The inspector also found that the policy did not specify that employment land be located on the appeal site, and that land use distribution within the wider allocation can be phased and distributed across different parcels. The appeal scheme's provision for housing and school land, even without employment uses, still complies with policy RO3. So ministers have been clear about local decision making, that overturning a recommendation made by a professional and specialist officer should be rare and infrequent. In cases where they reach the 10% national threshold, where applications are recommended for approval, are refused at planning committee and overturned at appeal, there is a risk that the authority will be placed in special measures under section 62A of the Town and Country Planning Act. So now I'll present the hybrid planning application that Countryside Properties have submitted. The full application is for 142 dwellings, including 35% affordable housing, open space, a children's play area and landscaping. The outline application is for an 80-bed residential care home with matters of scale and access only to be determined, with all other matters reserved, which is landscape, layout and appearance. So the site is located on Chelmsford Road, north of Shenfield Town Centre. It falls within allocation R03, land north of Shenfield, and is designated by policy R03 of the adopted Brentford Borough Council local plan. This is an aerial image of the site, which measures 4.5 hectares. There will be 3.94 hectares for the residential and 0.56 hectares for the care home. The parcel comprises agricultural land and is broadly oblong in shape and bound by the A12 on the north and on the Chelmsford Road to the south. The entire boundary contains mature trees. The key constraint for this site is the noise from the A12 and partially as well from the Chelmsford Road, which require mitigation. So the full planning application seeks to deliver 142 dwellings, of which 50 units, which is 35%, are affordable. There'll be 1.5 hectares of public open space, pedestrian cycle routes, sustainable drainage, landscaping, on-site biodiversity net gain of minimum 10%, and new access and highway works. The outline application seeks to deliver an 80-bed care home with a height of part 4 and part 3 stories and a new access. So for clarity, the layout, appearance and landscaping for the outline are not being considered and only land use, access and scale. So the site forms part of land north of Shenfield, which has been allocated to deliver 825 homes. Therefore, the principle of development for residential use is supported. Officers have assessed the application's compliance with the adopted local plan, in particular policy R03, and we are of the view that the proposal broadly meets the policy with the exception of the non-provision of employment land. In helping members with making their decision, we set out that Section 38 of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 requires development to be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The inspector's decision for Proudy's Homes is a material consideration in this case as well as others. When assessing the application in relation to policy R03, the application contributes to the 825 figure, providing 142 new homes. It complies with item C, providing an 80-bed care home, and item D, the inclusion of 7 custom-built homes. As for item E, the 2 hectares of employment land, the applicant submitted a marketing report explaining that the site has been marketed for employment uses for a period of 7 years. The report details that a total of 15 expressions of interest were made, and it's notable the requirement for employment land was made in a plan that was pre-COVID and has changed the demand for office floor space. We have afforded this weight in the decision-making process. None of the offers received were found to be compatible with the development framework principles in terms of land use, with the exception of the development proposals in the care home. Economic development and planning policy have both confirmed that the 2 hectares of employment land can be absorbed by windfall employment applications in the borough. Officers have also afforded weight to the fact that the care home is expected to generate 70 jobs. Therefore, whilst the application does not provide item E, the employment land, officers are satisfied that the application is still acceptable due to the marketing evidence submitted. In terms of the development principles, the application is accompanied by the development framework and is in accordance with item A. The application is in accordance with item B in terms of proposed layout, built form, character areas and landscaping. The application also provides vehicle access via Chelmsford Road, complying with item C. And additionally, the applicant will make a financial contribution to ECC for cycle infrastructure and public realm improvements at the railway station, meeting the requirements of item E. The proposal meets items F, G and H by providing well-connected roads, pathways and open spaces. In relation to item I, the proposal seeks to connect to the pedestrian cycle network proposed at the adjacent approved Redrow site. And this connection will provide an improved pedestrian link to Shenfield and the wider allocation. In terms of infrastructure requirement, the proposal complies with item A with inclusion of the signalised crossing. The applicant will make a financial contribution to ECC to improve local bus services, meeting the requirements of item B. The application also includes a drainage strategy, and ECC says have raised no objections, meaning that the proposal complies with item C. So, on infrastructure contributions, National Highways have confirmed that no contributions are required. The applicant will make a financial contribution towards improving signalised junctions and other localised highways improvements, complying with item A, and they will all contribute to the development of the quiet way cycle infrastructure, fulfilling item B. So now we provide details on the layout. The proposed development consists of 142 dwellings, a row of apartment buildings, units 1 to 91, sit on the northern boundary along the A12. 5 houses, which is units 92 to 96, are positioned to face an adjacent area of public open space, forming the site's eastern boundary. A further 3 groups of houses, units 96 to 136, are located centrally, while another group of houses, units 137 to 142, are situated near the public open space on the western side of the development. The layout is characterised by a central public open space, which includes a play area in the centre, an orchard, footpaths, seating areas, planting and attenuation basins at either end. A cycle and pedestrian path links all areas. The dwellings have been orientated to overlook public open spaces and roads wherever possible. In the cases where houses, such as units 92 to 96, back onto a street, small outbuildings have been added, creating frontages to the primary access routes. This approach is effective in activating all frontages. So the northern boundary apartments are arranged in a linear format, and the separation with the A12 has been created with the placement of rear car parking courts. The houses facing Chelmsford Road primarily consist of detached, semi-detached and linked terrace houses of 2 and 3 stories. A number of these properties have integral drive-through garages, and this provides a transition between existing buildings along Chelmsford Road and the urban edge and Green Street's muse character that the development framework utilises for this parcel within RA3. So the character areas for the application site are the urban edge and Green Street muse, and here we show an extract of these from the development framework. The urban edge character runs along the northern boundary and comprises of 3-storey apartment blocks with a central 4-storey block creating a strong building line and allowing for the placement of a central landmark building along the main area of public space. The scale and placement of these blocks create a continued gable rhythm with variations in material to help create visual interest. Developments are located around the central green space and along the northern boundary are predominantly red brick with the use of weatherboard as a relief material. This relationship is inverted along the southern boundary to Chelmsford Road, and the weatherboard becomes the predominant material, with red brick used as a feature material. The rest of the application is within the Green Street Mews character area. This is consistent with the development framework, and this application proposes 2- and 3-storey dwellings. This character area includes a mix of house types and orientations with a variety of roof forms, and includes a mixture of detached, semi-detached and terraced houses. This artist's impression shows an aerial perspective of the urban edge and the Green Street Mews character areas. And this shows an aerial perspective with a view from the north of the care home and the interaction with the new housing. This shows the heights of the proposed development, with the 3- and 4-storey apartment blocks along the northern boundary, acting as a noise barrier to providing a continuous frontage, protecting the wider site from higher noise levels that are associated with the A12. The central house is then lowered to a mixture of 2- and 2.5-storey dwellings, and the southern boundary increases to 2.5 and 3, which is in conformity with the character areas in the development framework, and they also act as a noise barrier to the Chelmsford Road. The density of the application site is 37 dwellings per hectare. Policy HB03 requires a density of at least 35 dwellings per hectare. Officers consider the proposed density to be acceptable. This shows the building height in the context of the surrounding area, which demonstrates the typology of building heights along Chelmsford Road that are predominantly 2-storey family homes. This section shows at the top of the slide the distance between the proposed houses, which is 3 storeys plus roof, and number 257 Chelmsford Road. There's a distance of 48 metres, which is equivalent to half the size of a football pitch, with a dense tree line and the width of the existing and new road infrastructure, creating a substantial distance. Officers, including police services, consider this relationship to be acceptable and will not be overbearing or have any detrimental impact on residential amenity. The submitted noise assessment shows that the baseline position of noise across the site ranges from 55 to 65 dB, as shown here. The areas that are most significantly impacted from the 2 roads are all along the boundaries and the southwestern tip. This slide shows that once the proposed development of 3- and 4-storey buildings are in place along the boundary, the noise levels fall to within the level which is considered acceptable, which is 55 dB. The noise mitigation measures include the dwellings that have been positioned to ensure they are screened from noise pollution from the A12 and the Chelmsford Road. Garden areas are internally facing to the site, are shielded by dwellings from the boundaries of the noise where noise levels are highest. And thicker glazing to units facing A12, which are openable, with the alternative option of mechanical ventilation. There is no objection from the Environmental Health Officer on noise, subject to conditions. There are 3 well-connected public open spaces totaling 1.5 hectares that runs the entire length of the site from west to east. The space includes a local equipment play area in the centre, an orchard, footpaths, seating areas and extensive planting and attenuation basins at either end. The southwestern public open space provides flood mitigation as well as serving as a well-planted informal space. The northeastern public open space includes a drainage attenuation area plus a mixture of formal and informal planting. All 3 open spaces are linked by a linear footpath. This shows the movement and connectivity plan for the application. It includes a central pedestrian and cycle path that travels from the southwest to the northeast of the site. Another pedestrian and cycle route is proposed centrally connecting the southern boundary with Chelmsford Road. Where the pedestrian and cycle routes meet the existing Chelmsford Road cycleways, A short section of the shared footway cycleway is proposed in 2 places, along with a widening of an existing refuse island within the central hatching of Chelmsford Road, resulting in 2 pedestrian crossings on Chelmsford Road. This is considered to improve pedestrian safety and aligns with the approved crossing route for Redrow. Highways and access improvements include the construction of a ghost island priority 2 junction with a right turn access lane, permeability with the existing cycle pedestrian path along Chelmsford Road, the widening of a number of refuse island crossing points, including the relocation of the existing pedestrian refuse island to the north of the site. This shows the location of the new vehicle entry point. The swept path analysis here confirms that a standard refuse vehicle will be able to appropriately serve the development. So residential parking is provided at 1 allocated car space per apartment and 2 allocated parking spaces per dwelling for 2-bedroom houses and larger. The total number of spaces to be provided is 248 spaces. As you can see, this is a reduction based on standards. However, the sustainable location has been afforded weight, as did the inspector, and we consider this to be acceptable. All units meet the requirements of the nationally described space standard. Each unit has been designed to comply with M42 standard, with 3 affordable units meeting the M43 standard for wheelchair accessibility. It also includes 7 custom-built units meeting the 5% requirement. All of the proposed houses are designed with private gardens, varying in size from 33 to 241 square metres. The apartments include between 5.6 to 66.2 square metres of private amenity space in the form of either a garden or a balcony, and are located adjacent to areas of public open space. As explained previously, the public open space equates to 1.5 hectares. The proposal includes 50 affordable dwellings. This complies with policy HP05 in terms of the requirement for a provision of 35% of the total number of residential units. The tenure is 70% affordable rent and 30% shared ownership. This is broadly in line with the 2016 SHMAR and accepted affordable housing mix, which was also within the Crowdace appeal. The proposal will achieve a 10.63% net gain of habitat units and a 52.89% gain in hedgerow units on site for biodiversity net gain. So this is in line with policy and the Environment Act. The site contains a total of 44 trees or tree groups and woodland, excluding yew trees as shown here. The proposal will result in the loss of 9 individual trees. To compensate, there will be the planting of 176 urban trees, resulting in a net gain of 167 trees on site. Whilst regretful that there is the loss of some trees, the loss has been justified due to the highway safety and the avoidance of harm to trees identified with the potential for back roosting, and the loss is considered acceptable by officers. So the development framework extract here indicates that this part of the R03 site is for the care home and for 2 hectares of employment land. The outline application is for an 80-bed care home only, seeking permission for access and scale, with all other matters of layout, landscaping and appearance reserved. As discussed earlier, the applicant has marketed the site for employment uses, but has not received an offer considered to be compatible with a residential development. In this regard, the proposal is non-compliant. Alongside the marketing report, the applicant has provided a transport note detailing a comparison between the traffic generation of a retail scheme for which offers were submitted and received, and the care home. The care home was found to have a notable reduction in terms of the impact to the local highway network. The application received a letter of support from the care home operator chosen to deliver the site, and the letter supports details of the need of this type of care, particularly the need for ensuite wet rooms, as well as the higher than average percentage of those over age 85 years living in this specific area. So weight has been afforded by officers to the fact that the care home is also expected to deliver around 70 jobs, whilst also addressing local care needs. Officers consider that the applicant has robustly demonstrated reasons for discounting the retail and fast food offers received during the marketing of the site. Brentwood's Economic Development Officer has confirmed that the non-provision of the 2 hectares of employment land can be absorbed elsewhere in the borough. As such, officers recognise that whilst the employment land cannot be provided, the non-provision is considered acceptable as it has been robustly justified. In accordance with the development framework, the scale of the proposed development is for a building consisting of both Part 3 and Part 4 storey elements, which acts as a focal point and provides clear legibility to the northern part of the RO3 allocation. The submitted Storey Heights plan identifies the proposed care home site as being opposite residential dwellings of both single-storey and 1.5 storeys to the south of Chelmsford Road. There's a considerable distance of at least 30 metres between the care home and these properties. Officers consider that there is a considerable distance and that it would not have an overbearing impact that is detrimental to the amenity of these properties. Not only is there a considerable distance, but there is a substantial amount of vegetation and mature trees which will remain in situ along the site's boundary, offering a verdant and high-quality amenity relief from the proposed care home building. The priority T junction with Ghost Island right turn is proposed, which ensures traffic waiting to turn into the care home does not impede the through-flow traffic along the Chelmsford Road. To accommodate the proposed access arrangements, the existing refuse island to the south of the proposed access is to be relocated further south and upgraded to a minimum width of 2 metres, providing an uncontrolled crossing point across Chelmsford Road. Internally, a Type E access road is proposed with a width of 5.5 metres, which exceeds the minimum distance in the ESSIG design guide. So the access to the care home also includes a 2 metre wide footway and a shared 3.5 metre footway and cycleway. Essex Highways have no objection to the proposed access. So the addendum report that was issued today provides members with the updated figures for contributions and items for the Section 106 legal agreement. The agreement includes contributions towards highway improvements and mitigation, education, healthcare, open space, outdoor and indoor sport, ecology, and details of affordable housing and custom-built housing provision. The contributions are set out on each of the slides. I can refer back to these if you need to. So in summary, officers have afforded significant weight to the site being an allocated local plan site, part of RO3. It results in the delivery of new homes. It results in the delivery of on-site affordable housing. It is supported by Brentwood Housing and Strategic Planning Officers. There are significant financial contributions towards infrastructure within the borough. It provides new homes of high quality and good design. There are no objections from all consultees, and therefore, on balance, the application is considered acceptable and recommended for a resolution to grant permission.
Thank you, Catherine Williams. Right, so we have three speakers on this one. The first of them on the list is Michael Ward.
Thank you. Like most local authority areas in the country, Brentwood faces a housing crisis it needs to get to grips with. The adopted local plan cannot meet the identified housing need, and the essential update to that plan is already significantly delayed. In 2024, there were 240 households on the council's housing register. That's a 56% increase in just 2 years. 106 households had at least one dependent child, and 24 households, including 22 children, were in temporary accommodation. Since 2016, the council has delivered just 37 affordable dwellings. In the last 3 years, against the need requirement of 1,089, the council has delivered -2. In addition to this, private rents are rising and house prices consistently outpace regional and national averages, making housing increasingly inaccessible. This underscores the urgent need to accelerate efforts to address housing needs in the borough. The scheme proposal assists in the delivery of 142 new dwellings, of which a policy compliant level of 35% or 50 dwellings are affordable, which weighs significantly in favour of the development scheme. The proposed development is a high quality design which responds sympathetically to the site's constraints and reflects the context and character of both the wider area and the requirements of the endorsed master plan, reflecting its location as an entrance gateway into Shenfield. Noise is an obvious constraint, with the A12 to the north and Champson Road to the south. This has been successfully mitigated through the built form with a continuous frontage of apartment buildings to the north and introducing height to certain houses facing onto Champson Road. Noise should not be a reason to prohibit development, but in fact all private amenity spaces are well within the 55 decibel target anyway. The proposal includes the provision of a care home, which was not originally envisaged for the site, but due to flood risk issues elsewhere and the lack of demand for suitable employment uses, it is now possible to provide the care home as part of this application. The community benefit weighs heavily in favour of the scheme proposal, as no other developer for RO3 can now bring this forward. Demand for the care home is clearly demonstrated, and a care home provider is on board to deliver the scheme as set out in their letter of support. The Council's Economic Development team has noted the number of jobs the care home will provide and is confident that the 2 hectares of employment can be provided through windfall sites deliverable through the Council's local plan. Therefore, it will not be the last chance to deliver on the employment land, but it is the only circumstance where the Council can deliver on the care home and provide much needed new homes in an area of growing and critical need. Finally, be kind to your officers. If it feels like you have no option but to approve the application, then it probably should be approved. And they're trying to help you avoid spending taxpayers' money on costly appeals with limited chance of success. Let's get on with it and prevent numbers of families on housing registers or in temporary accommodation from growing any further. I trust councillors will seek to approve the proposal in line with the officers' recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just clarify, were you representing Countryside?
Yeah, I'm the applicant, Carl Glossop. Yeah.
Okay, you're Carl Glossop.
Yeah.
Okay. Have we got Michael Ward here?
Michael, I was supposed to be speaking, not Michael.
Okay. Yeah. We may have an error in that. Are there 2 people speaking? I know that Elizabeth Gerard is speaking as an objector. Was there somebody else who contacted the council and asked to speak as an objector? No? Okay, that's absolutely fine. Right. Thanks. So, normally we would have the objector speaking first and then somebody from the applicant. Unfortunately, that's not happened that way. So, Councillor Gerard, who I saw, who is not councillor at this point, she's Elizabeth Gerard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am here on behalf of the Chelmsford Road Area Residents Association, who did submit an objection to the planning application. I would like to raise many points this evening, but I only have 3 minutes. So I'm actually going to focus on the site access, which has been commented on, but not really explored. I think everybody's familiar with Chelmsford Road. At the moment, if you go from east, which is the Mount Nessing roundabout, west into Brentwood, there's obviously the garage access, there's Plain Close, and there's Alexander Lane. With all of these developments, we're going to have access to the care home, access to Red Row, we'll have new toucan crossings, new pedestrian refuges, access to Plain Close, Countrywide, new cul-de-sac West End House, access to Crudace with a roundabout, another new toucan crossing, access to Alexander Lane and the football pitches. That's quite a significant uplift in disruption to that major road. And I think everybody who's ever travelled on that road realise the delays that come about on quite a regular basis. But I do want to dwell on the modelling that has been presented with the new ghost lanes, the hatching. Has any consideration been made to how the existing residents are supposed to leave their properties? As I look at the diagrams, if I'm trying to get out of the house and there's hatching and a refuge and a lane, do I go out? Do I go west to go to a roundabout, to go east? If I'm on the properties near the care home, how do I get in and out of my property when there are hatchings and priority lanes? It is impossible without expending additional miles going round Chelmsford Road. How is that an efficient use of the transport system? That's really my presentation to you on the planning committee. Think about the impacts on the existing residents when they are using their properties and their driveways. I've no objection to having new housing, it's needed, but it needs to be carefully planned and thought through. That is a major road, and you're putting a lot of obstacles in the way of people travelling through into Brentwood. Thank you.
Right, so as far as I interpret it, that is now the only two people who are down to speak. So we now have we've got Councillor Nicky Cuthbert, Councillor Gordon and Councillor Worsfold are councillors for the ward. I'm going to read out Councillor Gordon's wording from a screen. He is addressing the meeting as one of the ward councillors for the Shenfield ward. He apologises not to be able to speak in person. He has a commitment for this evening, which he can't change, and obviously this was a meeting that was dropped in at short notice. So this site, the care home, this was not included in the LDP. On the site in question was light industrial units, which would have benefited from the local transport link, the A12. It would also have brought employment to the area, placing some of our most vulnerable residents in a very unpleasant location between two very busy and noisy roads must be reconsidered. As it was not included in the LDP, it must be refused. Flooding. See page 19, 9.3. In the LDP, extensive comments are made around drainage. This point includes the following. As the site is located within a critical drainage area, development should minimise and mitigate surface water runoff in line with policy BE05, sustainable drainage. The entire Officers Meadow site is known to flood badly in the winter months. I'm struggling to understand how concreting over half the area will not exacerbate this problem. Within the local plan, there is a policy which states that developments must not have an unacceptable impact on the transport network in terms of highway safety, capacity and congestion. With over 900 plus properties planned in the area, and only one road in central Brentwood, this development will have an unacceptable impact on the transport network. the A1023 Chelmsford Road is already heavily congested during the rush hours and school runs, and a further 1,500 plus cars using this road will result in unacceptable and dangerous levels of congestion. Mix of properties. Why so many one-bedroom apartments? Looking on Rightmove, within a 3-mile radius of this site, there are currently 431 and 2-bedroom apartments for sale, some of which have been on the market for up to 11 months. Affordable housing needs. Page 36 and 37 only uses data for quote-unquote Brentwood. I believe that if this was recalculated showing properties in Shenfield alone, there would be a significant discrepancy in the numbers. Destruction of Shenfield. 3 years ago, we had around 2,100 properties in Shenfield. With this development plus others completed over the past 3 years, we are looking at this number to increase over 3,100, an increase of over 47%. This is beyond urban creep and represents a massive change in the character of Shenfield. Rail links. The application speaks freely about the wonderful rail links from Shenfield. Between 6:58 and 7:58 tomorrow morning, there will be 26 trains leaving Shenfield to London Liverpool Street. I know from experience and comments from other commuters, all trains will be standing room only at Shenfield or shortly after leaving Shenfield. The service is at capacity and the train is scheduled to depart every 2.4 minutes, zero chance of adding capacity. Conclusion. For all of the above reasons, I implore the Planning Committee to refuse this application. Thank you, Sir Thomas Gordon. Right. That's Councillor Gordon. So, in attendance but not on the committee, we have Councillor Worsfold. Councillor Worsfold.
Thank you very much, Chair. This application is by some way the worst we've seen in relation to the RO3 site. I'll focus on 3 serious defects. First is the wholly inappropriate design of the buildings along the front of Chelmsford Road. The proposals, as we've heard, include several 3- and 4-storey properties immediately opposite the existing 1- and 2-storey houses. The heights of the properties along the front of the site should be consistent with those opposite. The design is poor and out of character with the rest of Shenfield. The local plan emphasises that we are a borough of villages, and maintaining the character of our villages, including Shenfield, is paramount. Good design principles, as outlined in sections 5.126, 5.130 and HPO 3A in the local plan, stress the importance of creating aesthetically pleasing, contextually appropriate living spaces that contribute positively to the unique character of the local area. Preserving the current character of Chelmsford Road and Shenfield is intrinsic to the borough's diverse identity and must be central to this development. Crudely blending Shenfield into Brentwood would be a terrible legacy. Second, the far end of this site was, as we've heard, identified for employment purposes. The care home cannot be seen as a replacement for that. The care home was in the local plan for Officers Meadow, but Crowdays were allowed to wriggle out of that commitment for reasons that frankly have never been adequately explained. To stress, the care home and the employment provision are not either or. They were both required to be delivered by the local plan. Don't be fooled by claims that no one wants the land or that nothing suitable can be found, because the only commercial site in Chelmsford Road, the old MOT garage, was snapped up at the asking price within weeks when it came on the market last year. Frankly, the marketing exercise the developer claims to have carried out was a half-hearted sham. Third, there are many serious questions about the proposal for the care home. The Mid and South Essex NHS Trust and the Basildon and Brentwood NHS Alliance have confirmed there is no requirement for additional care home beds of that sort in this area. They want extra care developments. Little serious consideration has been given to the poor location of the facility, especially the exposure to high levels of pollution from the 2 busy A roads. Approving this application risks condemning vulnerable older people to premature deaths through exposure to harmful pollution. This application has little merit. This is not about no development, but it's a heartfelt plea for better development, and that's what Brentwood and Shenfield deserves.
Thank you, Councillor Westphal. Right, so we have on the planning committee, we have Councillor Nikki Cuthbert. Councillor Cuthbert, do you want to speak now?
I'm happy to speak now, if that's all right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Many valid concerns have been raised regarding this application, and the non-provision of employment land, of which there should be 2 hectares, should not be just accepted as an exemption. Whilst COVID has obviously reduced the demand for office space, there are many other options. With this application comes yet further potential increase in traffic along the Shenfield Road. However, lower traffic resulting from a care home versus a supermarket, for example, does not make an acceptable argument for the sandwiching of a care home between the A12 and the Chelmsford Road. Could these residents sit outside in fresh air, or are they to be prisoners in their rooms? Air quality and noise assessments have been reviewed and no objections have been raised by the Environmental Health Officer. However, noise mitigation measures in the form of 4-storey dwellings deflecting the noise clearly shows there is an issue, and these so-called acoustic flats are due to be people's homes. Will residents be able to open their windows, for example, or be able to relax outside or on their balconies? The character of the proposed site is not in any way comparable to the surrounding area, and the need for acoustic flats should not be justification for 4-storey dwellings, which would be totally out of keeping. I feel this application needs to be considerably improved, with a focus on increasing the quality of life being offered to Shenfield's future residents, and to enhance the lives of the elderly and vulnerable. They deserve more than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. I haven't got anybody else who's currently indicated to speak. I'm sure other people will want to speak. Councillor Barrett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, this one is a difficult one. Obviously, it's a number of the last one on this land north of Shenfield, and obviously we've been through a lot of these applications already, and we've learnt things, and we've along the way we've had problems as well. I do think that the design density and height is not in keeping with the local area, except I have to take in the planning inspector's point on that, we have a difference in opinion, and I don't think that's unfortunately going to be a tough enough reason to get him to change his mind. The major issue on the employment land is also an issue going forwards, because obviously on the Crowdo site, he said it could be placed elsewhere, and now it's not placed elsewhere, so that is an issue. The problem I have actually is with the parking. There's 52 less spaces than our standards. I mean, it's almost a straw that's breaking my back on approving this, because people don't buy houses next to the A12 near a big junction to not use cars. They are using it as a major link to transport, so they can commute from their house to wherever their place of employment is likely. So where are these 50 cars supposed to go? I mean, without affecting the local community. I mean, that is my big issue. We have parking standards. They're expected to meet them. Other places on the land north of Shenfield have almost met the standards. I'm not saying they have, but not this massive gap that we're seeing today. Not a 52-car gap. And that is my biggest issue. On the affordable housing, it's not where I exactly want it, but I accept it in line with the other developments that have been approved on this overall site. I would argue that our housing register hasn't really gone up, but I just looked at because the housing register numbers are in the HSC committee every month, and from March 2024, it's gone down by 6 families. It's not gone up by double. But still, that's 241 too many families on our housing list, but it's not ragingly going up every month. That's all for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Just before we move on, we have had other people to speak, but there was a question that was raised by Councillor Cuthbert, and I know that it was also a question I touched on when we had a chair and vice chair meeting. Councillor Cuthbert said, in relation to the care home, could residents sit outside? Did we have an answer to the questions that I was asking about the noise standards and external amenity space surrounding care homes? I'm obviously aware that the care home is outlined for this application, but do officers have an answer on that?
there are actually specific for care homes. All of the standards, including the Asset Design Guide, don't actually specify specific standards for care homes. So there can be amenity standards that will be provided, and there will be a garden space, but it's not being determined now. In terms of the noise issue, obviously we know what are the noise causes, and the actual built form of the care home, again, will be used as a noise attenuation. So as long as there is built form along the noise sensitive areas, that then means that the noise levels will be acceptable within the remainder part of the site. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks for that. Just to highlight to others, the image that we had as part of the presentation, that is also in here, I believe it's in the principal agenda on page 50, the baseline image and the proposed layout image. I was struck by the fact that if you look at the care home element of the site, the best noise, except for one tiny little pocket, and the care home is a different shape to the latest version, we know it's outlined, the best noise level immediately around the care home. The care home is surrounded by what was, in previous versions of this, orange. That's, I have to say, extremely misleading because there are two yellows which are almost identical, but they're actually different things. It's the 56 decibel level, which is that is a problematic level. But anyway, thanks for that answer. I just thought we'd get an answer to that before we're moving on. The next person on the list was Councillor McShane.
Thank you. Do we have a picture of anything of the A12, the site looking down the A12? Because I must admit, I have driven down there. Basically, the A12 is in a gully, which there is about 10 foot high from the road to the top. Yeah, it's about 10 foot, and then there's yeah. Yeah, but there was a bank there. All I was saying, I did notice a bank all the way along. Yeah. Okay, and just on the care home, there is another one that was passed recently at Eaglestown. I don't know whether that's relevant or not. But,
So the Hallmark application was actually quite different. Firstly, it was an allocated employment site, and what was proposed was a care home and a training centre for excellence. And it was quite different in terms of the care that was offered and the gardens and things that were then proposed. So again, I looked at it specifically to check in terms of the amenity standards and what was put in there. There are, and I scrutinised all the policy documents, there are no prescriptive standards on amenity, but in terms of the height as well, it's a similar type of height, and obviously it's on the A12 as well.
That's it, Councillor McShane. Okay. Councillor Gorton.
Thank you, Chair. I want to focus on one deficiency of this application, which Councillor Tim Barrett has already touched on, and that's the poor parking provision, particularly for the affordable housing flats. As a council, we have recently adopted the 2024 Essex Parking Guidance. Now, this has introduced the concept of connectivity levels, allowing parking standards to be relaxed in areas of high or moderate connectivity to town centres and public transport. However, this site is in a low connectivity zone, so parking standards should not be relaxed. The guidance and the previous Essex parking standards require two individuals to be provided with 2 parking spaces. Here, however, a total of 58 bedroom flats with only 1 space. Most of them are affordable housing. And their parking provision is also deficient. A visitor parking space is required for every 4 dwellings. So a total of 36 visitors spaces should be provided, but the plans only show 31. Now, with recent Stonebond application, they showed some flexibility on parking spaces they provided for. I would like to see the same here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gorton. Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Chair. This is probably one of the most difficult committees on this council, I think, because many of us often have to vote according to planning law, not how we would like to vote. And it was always a balancing act between the pros and cons of an application. My feeling is that the application is overdense, but the facts don't follow through with that, unfortunately. There are many aspects of this. When you use the actual physical building to provide barrier to noise from a large, busy road, that always seems regrettable. I would have liked to have seen an application with a lot more planting of new trees to actually provide natural sound insulation, and hearing the benefits of mechanical ventilation on windows and homes is very regrettable, but we obviously have to apply the rules of planning to decide this matter. Describing the houses as urban edge is a twist on the theme, I think, because it's just saying basically the houses are very near a busy road, and let's be honest about it. We're told that there's 60 that there's shortfall on parking spaces, and that's because, to quote on the item there, it actually says, so we can actually, this position has been agreed with Brentwood Borough Council to reduce carbon emissions and maximise the number of houses on the site. Now, in all honesty, if I was a resident reading that, I'd be pretty shocked and appalled. Parking standards either are mandatory and should be applied in the vast majority of circumstances or not. This is not, for me, a sustainable location in that one you can readily walk down to either Shenfield, Hutton Road or Ingatestone. Certainly very few people from the care home will walk that long distance. We do have still motor cars, you can't uninvent them. There are many things which are regrettable about this application. However, obviously we have to balance it with what we can do within a planning framework. I've got one question, if I may, and I would thank the officers for the report. It's very detailed and I appreciate that. Could we just, if we could pull up the schematic of where the care home is right by the roundabout. We've talked about the double glazing, which is going to be on the units facing the A12, which have trees behind them. But for the care home that's on the corner, now that's obviously probably illustrative where the trees are, but there's very few barriers between the care home and the roundabout. Other people are going to be looking out of the window on the care home on the roundabout side, overlooking literally a roundabout, nothing more, no tree screening, no natural. Is there anything going to be added there? Because it's not there at the moment today. Thank you.
Landscaping is a reserved matter, so they need to submit further details. So there will be more landscaping to come in, but it's not being determined right now. So that all of those trees at the moment are the existing trees, but there will be, and that is again up for determination later on, as is layout as well, which can be changed.
So, if this application is to be passed tonight, could I formally request that as part of the conditions, for more mature tree planting on that roundabout edge is included in any approved application? Because I do think the quality of life for people living in that care home looking out, you can obviously check what space is available, but I would hate to think it's just bushes, which is what it is currently, because that will be quite unacceptable, I would have thought, to the people in that care home.
Yes, that can be done.
Okay, so Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I think it's unacceptable and quite disappointing to see that this application seeks to convert a current combined pedestrian cycle path from Chelmsford Road to pedestrian only. This current combined path is a primary flagship Route 5 in the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan and the Brentwood Borough Cycling Action Plan. The Brentwood Local Development Plan is meant to sit alongside other key policy documents such as the Essex Cycling Strategy, and the Local Development Plan was prepared in line with the National Planning Policy Framework. The NPPF states under promoting sustainable transport to identify and protect routes which could be critical in developing the infrastructure to widen transport choice, and that planning policy should provide attractive and well-designed walking and cycling networks drawing on local cycling plans. When considering development proposals, the design and content should reflect current national guidance, including the National Design Guide and the National Model Design Code. Within this context, applications for development should give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements both within the scheme and within neighbouring areas. The National Model Design Code says that walking and cycling routes should be continuous, clear, direct and attractive. Taking out a direct route for cyclists on Chelmsford Road is clearly in contradiction and should be reconsidered against stated policies and plans. I also have a question on the mechanical ventilation, which forms a vital part of buildings that attempt to form a barrier. Is there a condition on the upkeep and maintenance?
Conditions 14, 15, 16 require additional information to be submitted, and those will deal with those points specifically on mechanical ventilation.
So, I don't quite understand. Is that coming later? Is that what you're saying?
It states that a scheme for ventilation design will be submitted and approved, so yes, it will be. You don't need to have that level of detail at this point. You need to have the the principle of what is being proposed accepted. So the glazing, all those fine details for glazing, mechanical ventilation, a number of things. Obviously, you can see the list of conditions. Can be then submitted for approval later on, and they will be going to the Environmental Health Officers that over there.
Great, thank you for that answer.
Just as an observation, is this maybe slightly surprising on the face of it, that I can understand why the detail of that kind wouldn't be submitted in normal circumstances, but of course, in this case, in order for those properties to be livable, the ventilation scheme has to work. So it's unfortunate, it's certainly very unfortunate to be in a position where we're being asked to make a final decision on this without having the evidence of what the scheme for the ventilation design would be. And obviously, because we don't have the scheme for the ventilation design, as is mentioned in 15 and 16, and we've got glazing in condition 14, we don't have the evidence in front of us that it would actually work. It's being said that it would work, and obviously the idea of a scheme would be that it would work, but we don't actually have the evidence in front of us.
Actually, it's up to the resident in terms of the windows. The glazing is going to be of a thickness where it will withstand the noise, but they have the option then, if they don't want the windows to be openable, that they can then mechanically ventilate.
Yes, thanks for that. Councillor Mayo is the next person on the list.
Thank you, Chair. Much of what I was going to say has already been said, and probably better not to say it. However, there's a couple of points there. I was also slightly disturbed by the mix of affordable housing, but I do take the points that have already been made, and also we need to consider the Chelmer Housing Partnership letter, which I think in this context is quite powerful. My main concern, though, is, like others, around the parking provision, and I'm particularly concerned about the stated mitigation for that, which is on page 37, 11.57, which it states that the Highway Authority is prepared to accept the position presented, subject to the condition that, and I quote, should any issues with parking on the highway outside the site arise post-development, the applicant should fund the cost of a traffic regulation order to restrict such practice, and thus ensure the future safety of all highway users. There's a couple of quite significant issues with that. Number one, where exactly would people park outside that site, given the proximity of Chelmsford Road? I don't know where on earth you park close to the site. The second thing to note that many of us councillors will understand is that a traffic regulation order is not something that can be passed in one or 2 months. It takes a considerable amount of time, many months, and so therefore the potential for issues for local residents are fairly high. So given that, that is giving me profound concern about giving approval to this. At the same time, I do understand and I do note that this particular parcel of land is always going to be very challenging for the developer. And we've also got to think about the context of recent decisions. But that, to me, is my biggest concern amongst those that have already been expressed.
Thank you, Councillor Mayo. I think I'll just say a couple of things now. I think this issue with parking is certainly a concerning one. We had mentioned that it was a 50 space shortfall. In fact, it's a 62 space shortfall. It's 20% less spaces are being provided across the site than not the latest parking standards, which Councillor Gorton mentioned, but the 2024 standard, which was the standard at the time this application came in. So the standards effectively have stepped up, and Councillor Gorton's concerns effectively are showing you that with the reassessment that's gone on Essex-wide, you can see the nature of this site from that reassessment, and that makes it clear that we are in a much less sustainable site than the argument is currently being made. So we've got that on one side, but the existing standards in 2024 were for 310 spaces for this site, given the number of dwellings that are being proposed, and in fact, all that's being proposed is 248 spaces. So as I say, that's a 20% shortfall, but it actually gets worse than that, because if you look at the lists on page 37, the amount of spaces being provided for the one-bedroom dwellings is essentially correct, absolutely correct. For the four-bedroom dwellings, it's exactly correct. For the visitor spaces, it's very slightly down, it's 5 spaces down. Pretty much all of that shortfall of parking spaces is the shortfall of parking spaces for the 2 or 3 bedroom dwellings. And there should be a provision for 176 parking spaces for those dwellings under the old parking standard. What is actually being offered here is only 119 spaces. Now that is 67.6% of what last year's now out-of-date parking standard said is the standard. So this is not close to the standard. There's a quote here that says somewhere or other, there's a quote that it broadly meets policy B13. And policy B13 is the policy that is saying it needs to meet the existing standard, the current standard, although in this case, the one that was relevant when it came in. It doesn't broadly meet policy B13 because it doesn't meet the standard, and it doesn't just meet the standard. The words I was looking for was slightly reduced. Paragraph 1155 says that officers have accepted the slightly reduced parking numbers. These are not slightly reduced parking numbers. To have a shortfall of that degree, to have less than 70% of the amount of parking spaces provided for the 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings is not slightly reduced. It's a massive shortfall. And it's a massive shortfall in a location which is, this is literally as far as you can go to the edge of Shenfield, without getting into the neighbouring development. So this is, you can argue that it's a kilometre from Shenfield High Street and Shenfield Railway Station, but this is as far as you can go from the centre in Shenfield. So it's not a Shenfield centre location, it's an edge of town location. Councillor Barb picked up on the character area name, Urban Edge, and I have to say I was thinking about it a day or so ago, and I realised Urban Edge is a very ambiguous phrase because it depends on which of those two words you put the emphasis on. Are you emphasising urban, in which case you're expecting something very urban, or are you emphasising edge? And this is an application which kind of wants it both ways. It's very, very urban, but it is literally on the edge of the development. It's overlooking the A12. On the other side of the A12, you've got open fields and you've got Greenbelt. That's what those units would be looking at if they had windows that would overlook it. So I think there's a significant issue as far as that's concerned. And I actually also think it relates, that issue ties in with this concern about employment and the non-provision of the employment land, which is what policy, let's remember, policy R03 says should be provided somewhere on the R03 site, and has obviously not been provided anywhere else on the R03 site. And it seems to me, well, let's just go and say a few things about employment. It's already been mentioned that we had a previous application which was local plan policy E08, which was the Ingatstone site, which was between the A12 and the A12 slip road. That was down in the local plan as employment land, and that was one of the very few pieces of employment land in the local plan which was towards the north of the borough. This is essentially the other one, and we've already seen that the E08 employment land, yes, there is employment land there effectively because Hallmark wanted to put in a care home and also an HQ and offices, so it was kind of employment land. In this case, we're seeing employment land pushed out of another policy in another site, in the only other site, employment site, which is in the north of the borough. And there's a massive concentration of employment sites right in the extreme south of the borough. You've got R01, which is Dunton Hills. You've got E11, which is Brentwood Enterprise Park. You've got E12, you've got E10 and E13, which are Childerditch, Cotton Hall and East Horndon. They're all very close to one another, and they're all very far away from this site. So if you're somebody who wants to move into a new property somewhere in the north of the borough, and you're hoping that you might be able to find somewhere to get employment close by where you don't need to own a vehicle, which is obviously the line of argument which is being made in terms of the under-provision of car parking spaces, you are really going to be struggling. I mean, you literally cannot get from this site to a site like Childerditch, except by a complicated journey on public transport and then some kind of walk across open countryside. There may be other sites which you could potentially get to by finding the right bus, getting into the town centre, getting another bus. It's going to be a very long and complicated journey. So I have got great concerns about the fact that this application is not providing what R03 specifically says it should be provided somewhere on the R03 side, which is an employment site, but also the direction of travel here, which is not positive in terms of employment sites in the north of the borough. And let's bear in mind also that this is what was proposed here is 4.3% of our local plan employment sites. So it's not a trivial amount of employment. Most of the employment is in the south of the borough. This is in the north, and we've already seen sites disappear. And this is also in the context of the fact that the local plan actually got rid of existing employment sites, which were in the centre of the borough or in the north of the borough. It got rid of an existing employment site, R07, which is the Sow and Grow Nurseries. It got rid of an existing employment site at R12, which was Hunter House. And at Waits Way, there was an existing employment site, and that's gone. And that's going to be a supermarket, it's going to be residential homes. So we seem to be in a process at the moment of knocking down employment sites and continue saying it's okay. I think at the beginning of that process, you can make that argument stand up. But we're currently several sites down the road in terms of that, and we're not seeing a change. We're not seeing a change of tone. And it's all very well saying it could be provided with windfall sites. Well, obviously it could. Windfall sites come forward, but nobody knows. That's the whole point of windfall. Nobody can predict what will happen. It may or may not come forward. So that's a concern. I think the other point here, yes, we have to pick up on the inspector's statement in relation to the Crowdo site, which is now hiding from me. So obviously the inspector picks up on, well, I'd say obviously the inspector does pick up on the issue of employment in relation to the Crowdo site, and says that the wording of policy R03 does not specifically require the provision of employment land on the appeal site, on the Crowdo site. No, it doesn't. And it didn't at any stage. That was never being looked at for the employment land. We've now got to the point where 3 out of the 4 R03 sites have already been dealt with, and the employment land has not manifested itself, and the care home has not manifested itself. And R03, as has already been said, does not say either or, employment or care home. It says both. And so this application is not consistent with R03. It's not consistent with R03 1E. Now, we could treat that as being a relatively small thing, but certainly when you look at that in conjunction with the simultaneous shortfall of parking, that raises big concerns for me. There are other things that can be said about this site. I think there are lots of things that can be said about the design, the heights of buildings, and the points I've already made in terms of the care home. It may well be the case that the Essex Design Guide doesn't provide specific minimum standards for care homes. I think anybody who's looking to put either themselves or an elderly relative into a care home in Essex might be concerned about that. I'm certainly quite concerned. And to be in a situation, I have serious questions as to whether a care home is deliverable on that plot. Because, as I highlighted, when you look at that heat map in terms of the noise levels, every single bit of land which is surrounding that proposed care home, whatever configuration it might be in, is land which is 55 decibels or 56 decibels, which is past the standard in terms of acceptable noise levels. And let's just go back to the words care home here. Is this caring for people? Is this caring for ourselves in later life or caring for elderly relatives? That is, frankly, a hellish place to put a care home. It's got noisy roads to the north, to the east, and to the south. It's surrounded on 3 sides by noisy roads, which you cannot mitigate in terms of noise. The one way in which you could imagine you could get acceptable external amenity space there would be to create a kind of a medieval castle effect with a tiny little courtyard in the middle, and say it may not have any sunlight or wind or birds or anything else, but at least you might be able to hear the roads very much. That doesn't strike me as being attractive care home. The care home is outlined, so we can't talk about the specifics, but my point here is I don't see whether it's deliverable or not. So I've got significant concerns about this. Everybody else is hanging back in terms of volunteering a route forward here. And I've been dreading this meeting because I can see the problems. I'll come to you in just a second, Catherine. No, in fact, I'll come to you right now, Catherine.
I just wanted to come back on the parking standards. I know that's something that I think everybody has raised a concern about. So when the application was originally submitted, the 2009 Essex parking standards were in place, which is what all the other applications have been using. Where the shortfall comes in is that the 2024 standards were actually adopted on the 3rd of March 2025, so the application was live. So had this application been determined within the 13-week period, it wouldn't be using these standards, just to say. But also, in terms of the number of actual spaces, it is 20% less, but every single unit does have a parking space. So there's not a case where you have not enough parking for everybody. It's on the 2 and 3 beds. They have at least 1, if not 2 or more. So that's on the parking. On the question about the deliverability of the care home, the actual site is allocated for a care home, but you've got a support letter from an operator that says that they want to take the site to put a care home there. Now, they wouldn't want to do that if they didn't think they could actually provide and find people to actually go there. So I think the operator, the fact that they're supporting it, they've demonstrated that there's need for it, they are wanting to actually engage with the applicant and take this on to deliver and build out should also be noted.
Yeah, I'm noting that. I know that an operator has expressed interest. I have to say I'm not sure whether it's been demonstrated there is a need for it. We had a face-to-face meeting with NHS Essex who said explicitly to us they don't want there to be any more care homes because there are quite enough care homes. That's the horse's mouth. It's not on a printed piece of paper, but that's exactly what they were saying to Brentwood councillors in a meeting which we had with them. It's also, I think, relevant to note here, if you look at what is being said in terms of the marketing of this site to employment, for employment purposes, it's not the case at all that there is nobody coming forward with an interest for employment. There were two offers in relation to warehouse and storage and offices. There were offers from supermarket providers. There was an offer from a health club provider. There were a number of calculations made in terms of whether that would work. But I've got a real problem with an argument that says it's completely acceptable to say we can't have an employment site because it might put a few more cars on the roads, but it's completely unacceptable to say yes to an employment site because it might put a few more cars on the roads, but it's completely acceptable to locate a care home in an effectively toxic environment where it's surrounded by noise from busy roads on three sides. I think I'm going to put people before cars as far as this is concerned, and let's bear in mind here that RO3 was down as an employment site. Presumably, since this went through a very long process, the council is taking into account the kind of car movements that employment sites somewhere on RO3 would generate, and that was acceptable as far as the local plan was concerned, and yet it's not being provided. So I think on the one hand, there's absolutely no evidence that it is impossible to provide employment on this site. Yes, there are issues with it, but as we've seen, there are issues with a lot of other things on this site. I think there are even more issues with providing a care home. A choice has been made, but that doesn't mean it's the best choice. I never wanted to be put in this position as far as an application of this kind is concerned. I think these applications have been mishandled. I think they've been problematic from the beginning, and it's no one person's fault. I'm not pointing fingers at any one person. But we are in a situation where I'm not hearing, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Is there a member of this committee who's thinking, I'd actually quite like to move this site for approval, ask for a second and we can go through that process? Is there anybody who would like to do that? Right. So, nobody is looking to move it for approval. It's clearly impossible. Councillor?
Sorry, can I just ask a question on the parking standards before we move into and I guess it's for probably a legal representative, I guess, is if this was going to appeal on and we were going to use parking standards, because we had changed the parking standards when this was in flight, which parking standards would the planning inspector take into consideration?
They would look to the current policies adopted by the council.
Councillor Corson.
Thank you, Chair. I've looked in quite a lot of detail at both the previous parking standards, the 2009 parking standards, and the 2024 parking guidance. And for this site, where it's low connectivity, according to the new guidance, there is no difference in the standards applied. For a two-bedroom dwelling, you need to have 2 parking spaces. And for every 4 dwellings, you need to have 1 visitor parking spaces. There's been no change in the parking standards which is relevant to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd also draw members' attention to the phrasing of 11 point 53, which simply says the adopted parking standard suggests, and then goes into the breakdown of figures which I've already mentioned. So we're being told by the officer that the relevant parking standards for this application are the ones which are being laid out in 1153, and then obviously in 1154 we're being shown that this application is 62 spaces short of that. As I say, a 20% shortfall overall, but only 67.6% of the provision which is supposed to be there, which the standard says, this is the standard, it says should be provided for the 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings. So that's a significant issue. But thanks for asking that question, Councillor Burke, because that is very important. Yes.
Can I just ask one question that's not been mentioned tonight? Can I just check, because we've had a large number of applications that have come to this committee meeting after the determination date. What was the determination date for this application? And if it's been exceeded, what was the reason it's coming to this committee beyond that date, if that were to be the case? Thank you.
Some officer who would like to answer that.
The date's on the front of the report, so it should have been the 25th of April 24.
Could I just ask what's been improved on the application to go beyond that time, or what was the reason for going beyond that time?
Officer has asked for a number of revisions to the application to address pre-application comments that were made. Officers weren't satisfied with the application as submitted, so we requested further information to address those comments. And then those were then submitted. There was quite a delay between when it was submitted and then getting reviewed. Since then, there were obviously applications that have been heard relevant also to the same allocation, which have had a bearing on how sort of applicants and officers have looked at the subsequent application, this one in particular. One of the particular cases, it was the inquiry, and what was going to be the outcome of that appeal was actually quite important and relevant as well. So, and we also were waiting for quite a while for a response to confirm on what the housing mix should be. So we had a different provision on the affordable tenure to what we have presented here this evening. So they've changed that to be more in line with now what is in the Crowd-Ace appeal, now that that's been formally accepted as well.
So that's an interesting question and an interesting answer. So just to get this straight, between the point where you said, I don't have your exact words, Catherine, but you were saying that officers weren't happy with the applications that currently stood, and there were further conversations. You've just told us that the provision of affordable has changed, and that was improved, and therefore got to a position where it was better from an officer's point of view. Was there anything else that was changed over that period?
There have been revisions to some of the design as well, and orientation of certain housing. So the mix drove though in terms of so when you change the tenure and the affordable, it then sort of impacted on design, and it does impact on layout. So there were some subsequent design changes. Officers also said that they were not satisfied with the marketing report, and we asked for further information to be provided, and rebuttal to the marketing report was provided. And yeah, that was quite detailed, and it was following that we considered that the evidence submitted was sufficient.
So some of it was to do with further provision of evidence that may have been available but hadn't actually been provided previously. Okay. I think I'm just asking that because there's also been some questions about whether, well, there was obviously no second application. This is still has the application number that came in at the first point, and there was no subsequent resident consultation, although there were changes that took place. And I think for some that's obviously been a little bit it makes it somewhat difficult for residents sometimes to track as things in the application start altering slightly, but there isn't a further application. Okay, I think so. Just to go back to the point, and I'm not going to go all the way at this stage, but just let's go back to the point nobody on this committee is volunteering to move this application for approval. I can ask again if anybody's thought about it. No. So nobody's intending to move it or looking to move it for approval. And the idea of deferral is nonsensical because we've gone beyond time and we've had plenty of time to discuss this. The problem at that stage is that there is only one other possible thing that this committee can do. Now, I'm going to call another timeout and have a conversation with officers so that we have some clarity on this, and then we can come back. It won't be the end of the discussion. Anybody who's got, obviously, you've got time to think. Anybody who thinks of any more questions or has any more points they would like to make, please think about that while we're having a break. We're just going to have a bit of a break and discuss what the situation we're in is and what we can do from here. So we will be back when we come back. Councillor Bob.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just ask, through you, the monitoring officer, it's my understanding that as the chair of this committee, you have the responsibility to present a recommendation either for or against this application. It is not something that can be passed to the members of the committee when it becomes difficult. I think you and the Vice Chair need to propose a recommendation and then we can decide how we wish to vote. I'm not sure what taking a break is going to achieve, truthfully.
That's not a fair characterisation of what's going on here. Any member of this committee, as you well know, has the right and the power to move any application for approval or refusal. I'm simply asking at this point, just to say that we're all clear on what the situation we're in is, I'm asking whether anybody is thinking that they would like to move it for approval. It's a simple enough question. Yeah.
Sorry, my actual question was for you to the monitoring officer. In the absence of someone willing from the membership of the committee wishing to place a motion, my understanding in every planning meeting I've ever attended is that the chair will either propose a course of action. I do believe it is your responsibility as chair of the committee, and I was asking the monitoring officer to confirm if that is the case.
Okay, through you, Chair. Yes, you've got out there and asked if anyone would want to make a recommendation. There hasn't been a recommendation. So we need to go to the next recommendation that could possibly be. So you asked for it to be approved and no one has come forward to do that. So the next thing we'll go to is refusal. We debate refusal, then it goes to the vote on that, and if not, you still can't make a decision on that, it will go to deferral.
I mean, again, it's possible that somebody here might think that deferral was an appropriate process. I find it difficult to believe, but is there anybody who's thinking that deferral might make sense here? Okay, so I will be put in the middle of this once we come back from a brief discussion, Councillor Barber. I can't get out of the middle of this, but we are going to go off and have a brief discussion, and when we've had that brief discussion, we'll come back. Right, we are back in the room, as you can see. So, is Brendan Johnson still, his image is not. We were going to ask a couple of questions, but he's not here, then we can't ask him any questions, can we?
There is.
We can hear but can't see. Right, okay. There were a couple of points raised about highways, one of which Ms. Gerard was talking about the multiplicity of access points onto Chelmsford Road and the way in which they might affect one another. So I think that would be useful to have a highways comment on. And the other one, let's see, the other one was just got in my mind. What was the question? Yes, I mean, he may also want to comment in terms of the parking standards and the sustainability of the location. And obviously, we've also talked about the noise effects of the A12, which he could touch on if he wants to. But so there's some questions. I still can't see him on any of the screens, but the disembodied voice somewhere.
Stand there, there is a little.
Oh, he's reappeared. Yes, you're on now. You're on the big screen. Thanks for that. I think that's useful. Two things. I've remembered what the other question that I had was, and also you said received pushback in terms of the two site accesses. The other question I had was to do with the comments which are being made by the applicants in terms of the employment site, the provisional employment site being problematic, because of the impact on the highway in terms of the vehicle movement. So I'm assuming that's actually come from, not necessarily you personally, but from the Highways Department. Could you clarify that that's the case and that was feedback that was supplied by Essex? Yes, sorry, that was directed at you. So the line of argument against some of the suggested employment provision, that the people who came forward offering employment provision on that site, the line of argument that's being used is that there would be a more significant impact on the roads because there would be more vehicles coming in and out as a result of that usage.
That would be correct.
So that was a highways. Right. Okay. And just the question about pushback. The Highways were looking for one site access. Presumably that was pushback from the applicants in terms of providing two rather than one, was it? Right. Thanks for that. I think that's helpful. Councillor Martin Cuthbert wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. So I've been sitting here holding back, hoping that someone was going to give a piece of divine inspiration to what is quite honestly an application that I'm not happy with. Councillor Barber said early on in the meeting that we're often having to make decisions on planning decisions, legal grounds, or quasi-legal grounds, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. The applicant said that he felt, or they felt that if you were unsure which way to vote, then you probably needed to vote for it. Well, I would say that if you're unsure, the applicant should probably have made it a little bit easier to vote for it. I've got multiple problems with this site, same as everyone else really. The parking standards and the employment land. We're at a point now where this is the last site and no employment land is coming forward. The parking standards, which we've gone through it over and over, and I think that's clear. There are some good things with the site. The affordable housing, it is an allocated site, and whenever I come back to the issues that I have with the site, which I think are considerable, I go back to the appeal decision and look at the inspector's response to those sorts of those points, and I personally I feel uncomfortable refusing it based on that, and wonder where we can get to if we do refuse it. What will we achieve? So reluctantly, I feel that I have no alternative but to move it for approval. And see where we go. Yeah, I shall open it up.
So, for a viable motion, we need a seconder for that. Does anybody
Thank you, Chair. Reluctantly asked to second that motion.
Okay. So, does anybody want to come in at this point? Now we've got a motion for approval. Yeah.
Sorry, for you, Chair, can I just ask this question before we start getting into any voting or anything this evening? Councillor Nikki Cuthbert, as a member of the committee and a Sheffield Ward councillor, your speech related to some concerns that may affect the residents in the future. Can I just ask if you come to this committee open-minded on this application and take on board all the comments made by officers, members of the committee and speakers this evening? Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we will go to the vote on the motion for approval, which has been moved by Councillor Martin Cuthbert and seconded by Councillor Barrett.
Would members please indicate for or against the motion when their name is called? Councillor Minor.
Yes.
Councillor M. Cuthbert. Councillor Dr. Barrett. Councillor N. Cuthbert. Councillor Barber. Councillor Chinnery. Councillor Gorton. Councillor Mayo. Councillor McShane. Councillor Naylor. Councillor Patel. Councillor Pound. And Councillor Sangha. Thank you. That's 11 for and 2 against, so the motion is carried.
Right. Thanks everybody for that. I realise that's probably not the outcome that the residents who are here for that item would have wanted to hear, but the council is under severe pressure in terms of the finances and in terms of who has the cards in their hand as far as planning application is concerned. Anyway, we have determined that item, so anybody who is here just for that item can obviously leave, and we can have a couple of minutes while anybody leaves who doesn't want to be here. Obviously, we have another Chelmsford Road item, so you may also want to stay. All right, everybody. Everybody's here, aren't they? Yes. Right. Okay. So we move on to agenda item 4, which is land adjacent to 152 Chelmsford Road, Shenfield, Essex. This is an application for a change of use from agricultural to a recreational stroke sporting use and the formation of football pitches with associated car parking, bin store and cycle store, the construction of a clubhouse with changing rooms and toilets, installation of a sewage treatment plant, boundary fencing, landscape and use site access, and part retrospective amendments to 20/01/752/FUL. This is application number 24/00640/FUL, and the case officer is Brooke Pride, and I also, Councillor Patel, do you want to, I know you've already stated your interest. Well, just
Yes, Councillor, I'll clarify for you. You are able to speak on the item as there's members of the public that are here that can speak, so you can speak on the item. So I suggest that Brooke Pride does her presentation, then you speak, and then before the debate starts, you leave the room. Is that okay? Brilliant.
Just to clarify, so as soon as the presentation finishes, I'll speak and then I have to leave, right? Okay, that's fine. No problem.
right, Brooke, after your long wait, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Planning permission is sought for the change of use from an agricultural recreational to recreational sporting use and the formation of football pitches with associated car parking, bin store and cycle store. Construction of a clubhouse with changing rooms and toilets, installation of a sewage treatment plant, boundary fencing, landscaping and new site access. The application is part retrospective, making amendments to planning permission 20/01752 FUL. The application has been reported to committee as it has been subject to a high number of neighbour representations. A total of 253 responses were received for this application, 184 letters of support and 67 letters of objection. The application has been submitted as a fresh proposal as changes are sought to the number of pitches, but we would emphasise that the principle of the development has been established at this site and the changes proposed are considered to be very minor. Recent case law established that applications to vary a previous permission under Section 73 of the current planning application must not fundamentally alter the development permitted by the original permissions in 2016 and 2020. In the previous application, the number of pitches were specified within the description. Consequently, a fresh application is required to amend the description in this case, as otherwise there would be inherent conflict from what is proposed and the previous description, i.e. a fundamental alteration. The photos show views from within the site facing the northern and southern boundaries. Again, this slide shows views into the site standing near to the access facing north and east. These photos show views towards the access point on Chelmsford Road. And these are further photos into the site facing north and west. The application site is located on the northern side of Chelmsford Road, a former agricultural field situated adjacent to the north-east boundary of number 152 Chelmsford Road. The existing site is partly visible from the public realm, with views into the access point and through the existing hedge and tree row that lines the southern boundary. The site as existing consists of an access approved under both applications from 2016 and 2020, with the details approved by a discharge of condition application in 2024 and supported by the Highway Authority. The parking area has also been installed with some of the pathway arrangement, the siting of the modular clubhouse, sewage treatment plant and pitch arrangement. The elements that are not covered by the previous permissions are seeking regularisation under this permission. The intent of the scheme is to provide 4 pitches to serve the needs of all age groups in the club, which would allow for multiple pitch configurations from season to season to accommodate different age groups playing on the site on their appropriate size pitches. The scheme would also provide 115 parking spaces, 4 disabled parking spaces, cycle parking provision, bin store provision, disabled accesses, dropped curbs to the pathways leading to the clubhouse, a detached clubhouse adjacent to the southern boundary, and a 1.8 metre black mesh fence indicated in red on the site plan. And as part of the conditions, it would be included to secure additional evergreen planting to further obscure the view from the public realm into the site from the southern boundary. This slide details the proposed elevations of the clubhouse. A modular building has already been installed on site and is in situ in the location illustrated on the proposed block plan. The building is to be altered with external amendments to provide black cladding and fenestration amendments. The black cladding would ensure the building has an appearance which is appropriate for a semi-rural location and consistent with the materials within the wider area. In terms of the fenestration changes, these would consist of windows looking out onto the pitches with the existing windows at the rear of the building, which fronts Chelmsford Road, to be removed. This would ensure the building appears discreet in its setting. The floor plan of the clubhouse details the areas proposed for the changing rooms, toilet facilities, storage and kitchen facilities. The layout of the building provides sufficient space and level of facilities for future users to the requirement of Sports England. These details show the 1.8 high perimeter fencing to be installed along the southern boundary for the safety of future users of the site, part of which has been installed, and the 1.2 metre spectator fencing set between the clubhouse and the adjacent pitches. Both fences will be a black mesh design. This elevation and plan form shows the details of the vehicular access gates permitted by the discharge of condition, planning reference number 20-01752 COND1. The gates have been installed on site and, as per the approved details, are required for site security. The site lies within flood zone 3 and a critical drainage area. Consultation has been undertaken with the lead local flood authority, the SUDS team, as the site area exceeds 1 hectare in size, and consequently this constitutes a major development for the purposes of this application. The applicant has engaged with the LPA and the SUDS team during the lifetime of the application, providing additional information where requested. Initial holding objections have been overcome as additional hydro break has been proposed, alongside mitigation measures previously installed on site. Under the existing pitches, a drainage system has been installed which connects to a hydro break. This is a type of system which controls the flow of water to reduce flood risks and, in this case, controls the flow of water into the culvert. The additional hydro break would be installed for the surface water runoff from the clubhouse, with the flow of water running towards the culvert to the northeast corner of the site. The scheme also proposes all hard-standing car parking areas and pathways in porous materials to assist with drainage. The SUDS team are the technical experts in this consideration, and they raise no objection to the proposed development given the nature of the use and the proposed mitigation measures. Officers are therefore satisfied this would alleviate any material flood risk. The scheme submitted, taking into consideration the established principle of the development by the granting of 2 permissions 2016 and 2020 and the lawful commencement of the 2020 application by providing the site access and car parking area. This scheme would not result in further encroachment into the greenbelt, would not result in harm to the character and appearance of the area or upon neighbour amenity, and would not result in harm to the highway safety with support given by the Highway Authority on the scheme. The scheme would not result in harm to the existing landscaping surrounding the site, with a condition to provide further planting along the site boundaries and provide surface water drainage mitigation in accordance with local plan policies. And as such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions that cover operational hours which are copied from the 2020 permission, external materials, landscaping, no illumination without consent, crossing facility details and the use of the building. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, thank you for that. Right, so we will go to Councillor Patel as the head of the queue for this particular one.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak on this. Where can I start, to be honest? I've been supporting local youth and this club particularly for a few main reasons, because it's a community-led and a charity basically where all the volunteers run the club, and it's been for well-being of the youth of the area. And all basically is this facility is going to provide a safe place for all the youth to play. The changing rooms, one of the must with this sort of sports, because when you play football, obviously you need a changing room, you need the toilets. Those blue boxes not going to do the justice. They definitely need the changing rooms, definitely need the toilets. I don't think anyone can disagree on this one. Again, it's providing a safe place for youth to play, gather, and enjoy the game that most of people love. And I'm always supporting this because of the youth, because of the area, because of the community-minded I am. I'm not going to comment, nothing on the actual application, obviously, for obvious reasons, but yeah, if I'm allowed to speak on this, then I will definitely be a pro on this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll bring you back once we've finished talking. Thanks for that. Just let you leave, first of all. Right, so we'll go to Gary Saxon first, who's a supporter. Actually, no, sorry, I beg your pardon, my brain's fried. We'll go to Paul Bartley first, who's an objector. Apologies, Gary.
Good evening. Well, first of all, I've got no experience of cancer operations, so I'm just talking as a parent and as a proud Shenfield resident. Whilst I'm sitting here as the objector, I'm objecting about the growth of the facility from what was originally set up, from what I can see was specifically children, mini football, with a small facility for, I think it was toilets and teas and coffees. The summary there was a set of pros. I haven't seen, does someone put up a set of cons? Because it just seems very positive. What I want to raise are some, listening to the previous discussions, I was listening about parking and standards. I want to deal with facts. When the football pitches are currently in full use, i.e. all the pitches operated in one, cars have to park on the grass. Therefore, there is insufficient parking. That's a fact. Doesn't matter what your standards are, what your assumptions were, that's a fact. From what I can see, that doesn't happen very often. I'd probably say maybe 30%, so it's on the that's aside. But it does happen. And that's, Chelmsford Road has a massive parking problem with the school, etc., etc. I would have thought this should be looked at on a planning point of view, and sometimes I might step outside planning because I don't really know the parameters. But we should be looking at what the need is, not what Hull Football Club wish for. The need is for mini football. If I drive around Brentwood Whalley, Shenfield, Hutton, loads of football pitches not in use. Hutton Community, Whalley, Brentwood Centre, they're occasional use. Because I live so close, I can see, and I'll just go for a drive, they're just not in use. The need, not the want, is for mini football. And so I suppose I've got to say, I used to play football. My kids have all been in sport, so I endorse sport as a healthy, not just personally, but as a interaction for individuals. My other concern is it's the creep. If this was in my business, I would ask for a gap analysis about what was asked for first to what we've got now. I'm just an individual. I can't work out what has changed. And there's subtle wordings that have been omitted. Now, and then as a resident, surely I'm entitled to my garden at some point of the year. I'm running out of time.
You've had...
Right, all I'm going to say is...
15 seconds.
If it's football, it should be done through the football season, and then I can have my garden in the summer.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Apologies for...
Thank you, Mr. Garvey.
Yeah.
So, next to speak, we have Councillor... Gary Sapsford, who is a supporter. Apologies for confusing things earlier on, Mr. Sapsford.
So yes, I'm the Director of Sport at Shenfield High School and the Chairman of Mid-Essex District Schools Football, have been for the last 25 years. We're incredibly proud of our reputation for football at Shenfield High School and in the district. This commitment to sport, has been built on many, many years of hard work. It's not just from people at Shenfield, the community, and the partnership with Hutton Football Club has been long-standing. We're really grateful to what Hutton have done to help us improve our facilities, but they're still not meeting the demand, huge demand. That means that we can have 150 boys and girls at football training sessions every single week. We have over 100 fixtures at Shenfield every single year. A and B teams, from 11 to 18 years old. We run a football academy for boys and girls post 16. This huge demand has meant that Shenfield Football, in partnership with Hutton, has meant that this year we reached 9 National Cup semi-finals, more than any other school in the whole country. Last year we won 4 national titles, only matched by 1 school in the whole country. So this partnership has proven really, really successful. But the demand for football provision is huge in this community. From what we're seeing, there's not the scope in terms of pitches, certainly quality pitches. We're very grateful to Hutton for allowing us to play some of their fixtures on these new pitches, which the drainage is incredible and so much better than we've got at Shenfield High School. They've also allowed Mid-Essex District teams to play some games on their new pitches, but we do have this problem with the lack of toilet facilities and changing facilities on this wonderful new facility. So in my role as Director of Sport and Shenfield and Chairman of the district, I'm incredibly supportive of these opportunities that are going to help children. We know the benefits are significant in terms of physical, mental, social well-being for sport, but currently, we are restricted in what we can provide because of the lack of opportunity for regular participation, safe participation, because of that lack of access to toilet facilities and changing facilities. I hope that this can be approved. I thank you for the opportunity to support this facility on behalf of the school and the local community, and I hope that you can support your officers in approving this application.
Thank you, Mr. Sapsford. That was very concise. Well done. Right, so, and now we have Kate Ayres, who is the applicant.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Kate Ayres and I'm a local resident. I've lived on Chelmsford Road, directly opposite the ground, for 15 years. I'm a teacher at a local primary school in Hutton. I've been involved with Hutton FC as a parent, coach and manager, trustee and co-chair of the girls section for 6 years. I am exceptionally proud to be part of the Hutton Football Club community and welcome the opportunity to address the committee today to explain how important this is. To the young people who play for the club, the volunteers and supporters like myself, and the local community who will benefit from this great asset to the Brantwood area. The use of this ground has already been approved, as has the majority of the application before you today. However, there are a few relatively small changes which will make a huge difference to the club and enable children of all ages to play football in accordance with an appropriate planning approval. Firstly, as you'll appreciate, our youngest players in under-7s need to play on much smaller pitches with much smaller goals than our under-12s. And so we need to be able to use a variety of pitch sizes. Our current planning permission does not allow for this. As written, it is too restrictive. Therefore, flexibility of pitch sizes is one of the crucial changes the new permission allows for. Secondly, the pavilion that the club has been able to procure needs to meet the requirements of the Football Foundation, who represent the Essex County FA and FA, to ensure that the internal layout is fit for purpose and meets all safeguarding needs. The building in front of you today, and which we seek permission for, accommodates those requirements. Your officer's report confirms support from Sport England in consultation with Football Foundation. These are the main changes in front of you today. The club already have permission for the use of the ground and the car parking on site. However, we are in desperate need of a building that we can call home, where players, parents, supporters can gather to share a hot drink on a cold winter's morning, where teams can meet to celebrate their successes together, and where accessible changing and toilet facilities are available for all. We are already proudly working with a number of local schools, and the new pavilion building and ground will be available for use by Shenfield High School, serving even more children within our local community. The changes we seek through this application enable children of all ages to play football on the pitches and provide adequate sports pavilion building. The development does not make any further changes to the already permitted change of use. Essex Highways and Essex Flood Team have confirmed no objections to the scheme, and 184 people have taken the time to write to officers in support. I would urge you to support your officers and the local community and approve the application before you today. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Rigby next, and then I'll go to the Ward Council. I think that probably works. So, Councillor Rigby.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to support this application. I speak as a ward member for Hutton East, where this club was founded. This proposal refines an already approved use of the site and will greatly benefit our community's young people and families. Hutton Football Club is vital to Brentwood's sporting life, with over 70 teams, including a thriving girls section. The club fosters physical and mental well-being, community spirit and inclusivity. The proposed changes will provide essential facilities, including a clubhouse, changing rooms and sustainable infrastructure to continue supporting youth football. Firstly, the flexibility in pitch layout is crucial. Adjusting pitch sizes to suit different age groups ensures safety and facilitates skill development for younger players. Secondly, the clubhouse is essential, a space for players, parents and volunteers to meet, celebrate and build community. It meets safeguarding and design standards, aligns with council pitch review and addresses accessibility leads. Its location is thoughtfully screened, with trees providing further shielding over time. The club's current clubhouse is no longer available to them, owing to a decision made by this council. It has been without one for a whole season, due to delays in hearing this application. This application has been thoroughly reviewed. Essex Highways and Local Flood Authority have confirmed no objections, and the drainage strategy complies with policy BE05, incorporating sustainable features such as porous services and rainwater harvesting. Traffic and crossing requirements have also been addressed satisfactorily. The principle of recreational use has already been established through previous permissions. This proposal does not expand the site's footprint or increase its impact on the greenbelt. It simply ensures facilities already approved meet community needs. Chelmsford Road is a much contested space before this committee. This application should not be controversial. The club wishes to be a good neighbour and prioritise youth football. Nothing more, nothing less. The application delivers significant community benefit, aligns with planning policy and addresses all technical concerns, including drainage-relating ones. I urge the committee to approve this application. Chair, members of the committee, give this club, our club, a heart. Provide them with a clubhouse to call their home.
Thank you, Councillor Whitby. Right, so I'm going to go to Councillor Gordon, who, again, I have a written statement from Councillor Gordon. So, he is addressing the meeting as one of the ward councillors for Shenfield West, ward, sorry. I apologise for not being able to attend in person, and he has a commitment this evening that he can't change. Full disclosure, he has met Kevin Wilkins on a number of occasions and have heard his vision for Hutton Football Club and the long-term plans to ensure its ongoing success. He has also met a number of club officials at the formal opening of the Chelmsford Road site in July 2024. Turning to the application, the first point that struck him was on page 2.1.2. Hutton FC have clearly been 100% compliant with previous planning applications and have implemented them in full. In his opinion, this tells him that they are good, compliant neighbours. They've also worked hard with the Football Foundation with the plans. Also in their corner is Sport England, who are supportive of the principle of the application and the design and layout of the pavilion. Straying slightly away from the application for a moment, the useful background, at weekends up to 1,000 volunteers and players participate in football on the site. In an area where physical and mental health is under threat, I strongly believe that competitive sport is of tremendous help, encouraging physical activity and developing teamwork and developing camaraderie. Looking at the objections and summary of support, I agree with some of the objections, but believe that Hutton Football Club can mitigate these concerns. On the support, comments such as the proposal will foster community engagement, support mental health, a safe place for children, great for community and improvement to existing landscape. In an age where community and children's welfare is often overlooked, this club is a shining beacon of what hard-working volunteers, yes, people giving up their free time to help others, can achieve. Turning to the application, the new clubhouse would appear similar to nearby converted Windbarns Farm and therefore would not be out of the character for the area. In my opinion, a permanent building replacing the temporary building can only be seen as positive. In summary, I 100% agree with the conclusion on page 18 and support the recommendation for approval subject to conditions set out. So that's Councillor Gordon. So we also have, not on the committee, we have Councillor David Worsfold.
Thank you very much, Chair. I welcome the huge emphasis that's been placed on this as a youth football facility, and indeed in the first two planning applications and this one, the only references were to youth football until we get this report. 10.1 suddenly mentions the prospect of the men's and women's teams moving in and playing at the new ground, which I think would be regrettable. I can't see any reason why the men's team would need to play, or any men's if they play the Saturday afternoon. When was the last time anyone saw the pitches at St George's used on a Saturday afternoon? There are plenty of adult-sized pitches in the borough. We don't want to see the creep of adult football onto this site at the expense of youth football. Local residents welcome the site for all the reasons that have been explained, of giving great opportunities to young people. So I'd raise that as one concern. I'm delighted to see that when it comes to the hours of operation, that it still clearly states that vehicle movements have to cease at twilight. So that means that's not training or matches finishing at twilight. That means everyone's off the site. And again, that would give great comfort to local residents. I have a question which one of the officers can address at the end. In the original planning permission granted in April 2017, there was a cap of 48 players at any one time on the site. In the application that we're looking at tonight, there was a request to raise that cap to 80. Now that seems to have disappeared from the report. I'm not totally opposed to expanding the numbers on the site at any one time, but as we've heard, the car park is already frequently full, and Sunday mornings it's always full. I understand that the club has an arrangement with Shenfield School, and we've heard about the relationship there, for overflow parking, and that was used at the opening festival. However, if you saw the parents and young children crammed onto the traffic islands in Shenfield, in Chelmsford Road, you would have been horrified. If there is any question of lifting the cap from 48 to 80, it must be conditioned on the provision of the pedestrian crossing before the cap is lifted. It is simply not safe to expect those numbers of parents and young children to cross that road from Shenfield School to the football ground. And I would have thought the school would also be grateful, as we heard. They're starting to use it, and they must have children, not quite so young as some of those playing mini soccer, but crossing the road in quite large numbers. Chelmsford Road is not safe without a pedestrian crossing. As is mentioned here, I would ask that it be conditioned before any increase in the playing numbers allowed at any one time.
Thank you, Councillor Westphal. Right, so we also have Councillor Nikki Cuthbert, who is on the committee. Councillor Nikki Cuthbert, do you want to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. To be honest, most of the points that I was going to make have already been picked up. Several of them have been addressed and basically should be covered with the stated conditions. For example, time restrictions are vital in this residential area. The other thing, of course, is road safety. As always, it's paramount. And within this application, as Councillor Walsford has said, the number of players to be allowed at any one time has been increased from 48 to 80, which does seem like a huge jump, and it would be interesting to hear how this is going to be implemented and what's going to happen. Because it would result in a very much higher volume of traffic and parking requirements, and also the increased noise and disruption. But as Councillor Walsford has said, the Shenfield School is on the opposite side of the road, and it is extremely dangerous. It's an increasingly busy road, and so the crossing really must be addressed as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Needs to be addressed as a matter of urgency, yeah. Right, Councillor Barber wants to speak.
Thank you, Chair. What a contrast this application is, and what a pleasure it is to actually be here tonight looking at this. So many times as a councillor, we're talking about things being damaged, neglected, not maintained, and things which are in decline. And this is a really high-quality sports facility for the Borough of Brentwood. I noticed 73% of the responses were in favour, and that was on a high response rate of 253. I think we've, as a council, have done consultation on things and not got that kind of response rate on consultation of what would you like us to do for the next few years. I'd like to thank everyone at the Hutton Football Club for everything they've been doing for our borough. People that give up their time freely and have the passion and the drive to encourage people to, particularly children, to adopt sport and to stay healthy are heroes as far and heroines as far as I'm concerned. If I look at the application, I look at the fact that, and I'd like to thank Brooke, the officer, for a very well-conditioned application. I think most of the concerns that I would have, 10.5 about the conditioning of the pedestrian crossing is in there. The vegetation being set back from the boundary of the site, so it doesn't overgrow the highway, is in there. The actual fenestration of the pavilion is sympathetic to the neighbours, and I'm sure, to be honest with you, I also think the specific exclusion of the possibility of lighting, which could be very intrusive, of course, is a very good condition, and the coming into and out of the site. And because that will be done during daylight hours, I think the shining of headlights won't be as much of an issue as some may think it is. I think it's a marvellous community facility. I've been over there and seen it during the site visit. It's a real tribute to the people involved. If we weren't to approve this, it would be a massive, if you pardon the pun, own goal.
So I would like to recommend this for approval if someone is willing to second the appearance of Chinnery. Who's off the side. But well done to the officers and thank you to the applicants, and I hope that some of the concerns that some of the residents have down that road do not transpire, but I believe it's a huge asset to the borough, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barber. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I agree with what Councillor Barber said there. It's, I think it's for the leisure and the sports activities of the borough, it's a positive application, and what I'm really glad is it's actually got to committee finally now, and it can be, they can move forwards rather than be in limbo. So hopefully we can move forwards and this can be approved and they can get on with playing football. I guess I was going to ask about the crossing and whether we can condition on it because it's outside the red line and it relies on Essex County Council to do something. And no offence to the people that work for Essex Council here, they're not really quick. You know, I hate to put a condition on which is not in control of the football club. It's in control of Essex County Council. Thank you.
So I think, Brendan, you're sat there, obviously. Many thanks for you being sat there. Is there an answer in terms of how the crossing could be expedited? Because there clearly is a potential safety issue here. Okay, I think that's probably useful. Obviously, everybody wants to see it implemented. I can understand money might be an issue. We don't actually have anybody else down to speak. I would have been only too happy to move this or second it myself. I've got I was a little bit concerned by the way in which there is the relationship between the access, the entrance exit road and the properties on the other side of Chelmsford Road is. I'm interested to hear that Ms Ayres is immediately on the other side of the road. I can see that there are potential issues there, although they would be, a lot of it would be to do if there was use later in the evening and there were headlights on cars, but obviously at the moment we don't have that in the application coming before us. So I think I've got less concern over that, but I wanted to see that on the site visit. One other very small thing. The condition about the evergreen planting, personally, I would like to see evergreen planting which is native plants rather than laurels or leylandia or something like that, because those are the sorts of things, whilst they can provide benefits for natural species in this country, they do have a somewhat invasive and potentially problematic effect. I'm not necessarily asking that as a condition, but I think it's, from my point of view, it's the right way of going, and there clearly are plenty of evergreen native species which could be planted along in there, and I think that would help. So I absolutely endorse the positive comments that have been made. Understand the concerns. One other question though, we've had some comments about the lack of the car parking and the cars effectively overspilling already. In terms of where we are right now, are the proposed number of car parking spaces already available, or are there further car parking spaces that have yet to be provided, and is this one of the reasons why we're saying those?
No, the whole centre that you see on the site visit is the area going to be provided for car parking.
Okay, right. So we are where we are. That point has been heard, and obviously there are concerns, and we've got other sites with parking issues, and if there are problems with overspill, then there are problems with overspill, and it needs to be looked at. The positives are there, and we've had a motion for approval, which has been seconded. Does anybody else actually want to speak on this? Nobody? No, that's fine. Right, so we can go to the vote on motion for approval.
Thank you, Chair.
Would members please indicate for or against the motion when their name is called? Councillor Mynott. For. Councillor M. Cuthbert. For. Councillor Dr. Barrett. For. Councillor M. Cuthbert. Councillor Barber. For. Councillor Chinnery. Councillor Gorton. For. Councillor Mayo. For. Councillor McShane. For. Councillor Naylor. For. Councillor Pound. For. And Councillor Sanger. Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Yes, that is unanimous. We can retrieve Councillor Patel from his. I think he can see us. Yes. Brendan's being told that he can go if he wants to go. Thanks for his attendance.
Thank you.
I'll just let people leave. We do have one more item. Right. So yes.
Can we just provide a little bit of feedback? When Mr. Johnston talks, members of the public who are viewing online can't hear what he's saying. So if that could be addressed in future meetings, thank you.
That's a pity. Okay. Well, he was here. At least we heard him, and residents who were here heard him. But it should be audible online. Right. So. Members will be aware that we do have an urgent item tonight, which is a report brought to committee to determine whether a provisional tree preservation orders which have attracted an objection should be confirmed by the planning committee as per the council's constitution. Mr. Steve Plum, can you introduce this report, please?
I think Caroline's going to introduce.
Whoever wants to speak.
Thanks, Chair. Just by way of introduction, so just an amendment to make for you, and if the clerk can minute as well, that recommendation 2 should read confirm TPO 05 of 2024, not 2025. So if you can minute that, please. And yes, as you've just said, that this report just brings to the committee the request to grant or confirm one of those orders and to not confirm the other. Unless there's an objection, then this is normally delegated to officers, but we have an objection which is appended to the report, so hopefully you've been able to have a look through that and understand the issues. But if you have any questions, then the council's ecologist is here to answer them for you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that. Just maybe before we go to Mr. Plum, if we go to Councillor Ragland, obviously he's not on the committee, but she can speak at this point.
Chair, thank you very much indeed for allowing me to speak. I'm the ward councillor for this area, along with 2 others. The concern I have in relation to this relates to the one on which we now have a recommendation to remove the tree preservation order, which I'm going to call number 4 for ease of reference rather than number 5. This, I believe, has not been seen by our burgeoning arboricultural team. I appreciate there's an ecologist here, but I have some concerns that they, I think, would have liked to have seen it. Importantly, what it doesn't do, this recommendation in relation to number 4, is to consider the amenity which is provided by these trees because they run from the backs of houses in the Haythrop to the A12. Now, what that enables is that those trees help on the noise front, but importantly they absorb carbon. They are significant for the purpose, and undoubtedly one of the reasons they were left there was because of the A12. The National Highways, in fact, owned the land, and it is still debatable, contrary to what's here, I think, as to whether the land has actually been sold, at least if the lawyers amongst us think that an agreement to sell probably constitutes something moving in that direction. So, for me, this is a really important point, and I have a serious concern as well that the Carter-Jonas report can't really be regarded as independent in this context. It's interesting that it moves to split the two recommendations and argue vehemently against number 4. And it should be noted that there is a dispute between the residents in Haythrop and with the National Highways and also with the developer. And that dispute makes it a worry for the residents. The Carter-Jonas, acting for the landowner, we say here the landowner's arboricultural assessment, is one which could be influenced by the fact that the imperative of their client is towards the idea that this should be removed in relation to that part. So no aspersions on them whatsoever, but I think it would be better for the fairness of the process for there to be an independent assessment. And talking to our burgeoning agricultural team, they rather felt that too. There are some procedural issues, if I may, very quickly. The objectors, in this case being the developers, had 28 days to lodge an objection with closing dates specified on the paperwork, and that's the rules. That isn't the date of objection in the paperwork, but I can see. But importantly, then the council officers will contact the objector to resolve the dispute and go before a licensing or appeals committee for members of the council. So there are some procedural issues lurking around there. But the biggest procedural issue is that there are no residents here. And given the dispute, I'm perfectly sure they would have wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
So, Chair, could I perhaps urge, this is my last point.
You've had, well,
I appreciate, but can I just make the conclusion?
there is a statement from a resident which I'm just about to read out. So
that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
You've had 3 minutes and 15.
But could I just say that I'm urging that
Council
should be retained and extended a little. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Got the sequence a little bit scrambled here, but so I will read out the statement from the resident whose name unfortunately has disappeared from the top of it. I've forgotten his name. David Lawn. Right. This is Mr. Lawn's statement. Members will be aware that 2 tree preservation orders were made in June last year in response to activity taking place on wooded land between rear gardens on the north side of the Haythrop and the A12 slip road. Inquiries revealed that 2 large plots of land were being purchased from Highways England, now National Highways. If the privately owned depot separating these wooded plots is taken into account, and we believe it is under developers' control, a very substantial building plot was being assembled. In view of the potential and actual damage going ahead on the land, tree preservation orders were requested and accordingly placed on the 2 principal sites. This prevented further disruptive activity. The orders were remade last December with minor modification. They lapsed on June the 4th, which would leave the trees with no protection in 3 weeks' time. The aerial photographs supplied by National Highways as part of their Tempo submission and reproduced in the report before members shows the extent of the foliage on the 2 sites, at least from the air. The Tempo and W-Tempo, referring to the Haythrop Woodland Order, submissions supported the preservation order on Roman roadside, stated the Haythrop order could not be justified due to the overall condition of land and vegetation. It did, however, say that the site contained individual trees of merit, for example, oaks near the eastern boundary. The residents are not qualified to challenge these findings from an arboricultural perspective. However, we feel the Tempo report underplays the wider environmental considerations and any benefits preservation orders might have were development ever to be considered for either or both sites. In particular, the sites seen together present a continuous wooded frontage on the sole entrance into Ingerstone from the west and including the A12 slip road. The woodland on both sites makes a massive contribution to the distinctive rural entrance into Ingerstone. New housing is currently being built opposite the Roman Road TPO site, and planning permission has been granted for a substantial nursing home and offices scheme next to the Roman Road TPO on the other side of the slip road. These developments will have a significant impact on the gateway into planting a stone and the preserved trees will mitigate this to a great extent. On the question of future development on these sites, there are several hoops to go through before any proposals can be considered. Both sites are in the Green Belt. The local plan is up to date and relevant. It doesn't designate either site for development. In order to achieve development, a process of formal local plan review must be gone through, including local consultation, which is yet to happen. This committee is this evening being asked to consider both TPOs alone, not some future development scenario which would be contrary to current policy. Potential government policy changes are irrelevant for this evening's decisions, but making TPOs now would enable the Council to retain control and send a signal to any future developers that protection of the environment is vitally important. Tree preservation is the only way at the current time to ensure both sites stay as they are into the future. However, we stress that future development does not form any part of the proposals to be considered this evening and must be separated from it. We would in any event object vigorously to the principle of developing either site. Nevertheless, we are faced with the realism of the W-Tempo report, and although we disagree with it, we have to accept it so far as it applies to the Haythrop site. There is a potential way forward. Members are asked to consider leaving the Haythrop TPO undetermined until it lapses in June. This would provide a 3-week slot for the Council to look more closely at this land and whether there is merit in preparing a smaller and more focused order. For example, by retaining those trees identified in the W-Tempo report and any others needing protection, we ask the committee to consider this approach. Please confirm the Roma Road order without notification and allow a short time for a re-evaluation of the Haythrop order until it naturally lapses. And that's, I'm now not giving myself and him the time because we've gone over 3 minutes. So, right, so I will come to Mr. Plum. Yes, I'll come to you now, because the other person who has the right to speak at this point is Councillor Gordon, who's a board member and on the planning committee, but he can speak since we're now into planning discussion. So, Mr. Plum.
Right, thank you, Chair. First of all, in terms of job title, because I'm a consultant, I tend to operate for several years. I've actually worked in this capacity as a consultant for the Brentwood Council 8 years tomorrow. For about 7 of those years, I was labelled the arboriculturalist. The problem is because I'm a chartered landscape architect and an ecologist, depending which title I was using, what application I was dealing with, it got very confusing. I have been dealing with tree matters for the council for 8 years, and previously when I was employed with the council, I ran the TPO section, so I do feel I'm capable of carrying out the necessary assessments. The background of this was back in June last year. It was brought to the council's attention by the parish council and ward councillors and Mr. Lawn that the sites were up for sale, and so we served 2 orders at that time. The option we have at that time, you do not have to go onto site to do that. You make the order. So initially, I prepared the first order for the one that's actually disputed as an area order, which means you protect the best trees. I'm not supposed to say this because I'm not supposed to have gone on site, but I visited Mr. Lawn's garden and had a look in. I could see reasonable way into the woodland, shall we say, the treed area. I did note that there wasn't a lot. Most of the trees were very small and not of good quality and would not meet the individual standard. An area order is only supposed to be served temporarily. They're supposed to be reviewed and within 6 months. And my view was that we would really struggle to find any trees there which would warrant a preservation order. The order is not based just on the trees, it's their amenity value. And the amenity value is based on public viewpoints, not gardens, properties. The issue is always with this, because they are behind the houses, they actually, how many of them warrant the actual individual order. That was the reason for approaching it as a woodland.
historically, looking at Google Earth, you can do the time lapse back. You can see much of that area wasn't wooded 20 years ago, so you can tell it's quite small woodland. We pushed with that order, knowing that there were, it was not a strong, the TPO 5 was a strong order. It's adjacent to the road, it's clearly visible. The objectors, they said neither order should be confirmed. Obviously, their consultant's report, I'm not sure if they've read it or not, but that says it definitely warrants it. So I don't think there's no dispute over that one at all. My concern is that with whichever way we do it, whether it's as an individual order on individual trees or as a woodland, it really doesn't stand up to scrutiny that would not warrant an order. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. So, Councillor Gorson.
Sorry, I'm a ward councillor as well, as I'm sure you all know. Couple of questions for Mr. Plum. First of all, is the tempo method of assessing TPOs, woodland for TPOs, the gold standard, or is there a better system?
No, it is the industry standard. These days, it was introduced by 2007, and what it was trying to address was the case where people would go out and go, oh, that's a nice little cherry tree, and put an order on it without actually assessing its long-term value and how closely. So, the orders we see nowadays is quite often you'll find a tree which is at the back of the garden and you can't see it from any viewpoint. It was trying to address TPO should only be served on trees of high amenity value or woodlands of high amenity value, and it was to try and give an objective score to how those were assessed, and now it is the sort of industry standard.
And secondly, there isn't much time now before the orders lapse. Would there be time to carry out an independent assessment in that remaining 3 weeks?
Possibly. Obviously, I have other work commitments and things, but I could potentially go and have a look and see. I have spoken to Mr. Lawn about accessing the site. Obviously, it is private property, so I'm not supposed to go on site, but we've agreed there might be options to view particular trees and can see what options there are, but it does need to be, as I said, assessed against the tempo.
You can come back, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Plum. Can I come back on other points? I agree with what Councillor Ragland has said. Obviously, these trees at the moment act as a sound barrier, noise barrier between the A12 and the Wadden Chase estate. They act as a carbon sink as well. If these trees were to be chopped down, there would be a loss of biodiversity, and in any future planning application, where would you measure the baseline biodiversity? Would you measure it from the site before the trees are knocked down or after the trees have been felled? That's a philosophical question, perhaps.
Yeah, the
baseline for biodiversity net gain is set within, the legislation goes back to anything from January 2020. So if there is a habitat clearance which is carried out prior to a development, we can assess it against the previous baseline. So that's actually written into the guidance and accepted procedure as sort of under habitat degradation. So it would be assessed against woodland as an emerging woodland. Thank you. And I would point out that the NPPF is quite clear about the value of greenbelt. So paragraph 143 of the NPPF states that the greenbelt serves 5 purposes, and I think the first 2 of these are relevant: to check the unrestricted sprawl of large built-up areas and to prevent neighbouring towns merging into one another. If either of these blocks of woodland were developed in future, it would lead to really a merging of current built-up areas. There would be more or less a continuous built-up area between the east side of Ingatestone all the way through Ingatestone, Mount Nessing, Shenfield, Brentwood to Brook Street. Just think that's worth bearing in mind. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, just before I've got Councillor Shane next, I'm just going to say, I understand from conversations and also from reading the report and from what Mr. Plum's saying, and also from what Mr. Long is saying in his comments. There's general happiness with R2 confirming TPO 05, but there are questions there are questions about what could possibly be done in relation to TPO4, not TPO4 itself, but to trees on the TPO4 site, which are close to the property boundaries for residents in the Haythrop and in yes. So I can understand that the residents in those locations would be keen on there being some kind of assessment of trees which performed a valuable role as far as they're concerned between them and the site. And so we don't currently have that as part of the recommendation. I'm not completely sure whether it's appropriate at this point to try and put it in as a recommendation if we're not totally clear whether we could do it or not. But I understand that it would be welcome, maybe, for R1 to be saying something along the lines of an assessment of individual trees in the TPO4 site to be made, and with a view to potential other TPOs being put in, obviously, for appropriate trees. Is that, obviously, Mr. Plum can comment in terms of the appropriateness as far as the TPOs, so I'll go to Mr. Plum, but there may also be an officer question. I'm not quite clear who's the expert on the whole TPO process and whether that's an appropriate step for us to take. But Mr. Plum.
I can comment on the TPO process. I'm not sure about the matter of recommendations, but certainly I can arrange with Mr. Lawn to visit next week and review the trees and then consider the options for serving a new TPO if that addresses the concerns that have been raised.
So a TPO could be looked at in terms of individual trees in those barrier locations. I mean, I can understand that it may well be the case that trees on the edges of a block like that may have been there for longer, and therefore they may have individual value and also value to the residents. We've got, and just at this point, I'm perfectly happy to be moving R2 as it stands and moving R1 as it stands, but we have this understanding that a review will take place on the specific individual trees on the TPO4 site. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, before we do that, I mean, my vote on that is going to be affected by the comment on 4.2. There was no right of appeal against the decision of the committee. So, are we really going? I mean, the reason I've got a problem with all of this is that initially the temporary preservation orders were placed in June of last year. The report was produced in December of last year. This is rushed to this meeting yet again, lastminute.com, as an emergency item, with a gun to our head, if you like, saying we've only got a few weeks to decide and sort something out. My issue is, if there is no right of appeal against the decision of this committee, why do we not issue a temporary TPO for another year on the one which is in question and tell the landowner that if they don't give us access to that land to inspect the trees, we'll decide and err on the judgment that actually we're going to grant a full TPO that might actually bring them to the table to actually allow you access to the land to make a proper informed decision. And my question to Mr. Bell, sorry, obviously it's a long introduction, is there any risk there to the council, please?
With regards to the process, I think we'll need to divert to Steve Plum on that, but I can see where you're going in terms of what is the solution here, but I think we need Steve to comment on that.
Sorry, I'm asking you specifically because I'm asking in terms of costs. Any potential costs that can be awarded against the council for doing that action, because with the best respect to Mr. Plum, he won't be able to say that, I don't believe.
Yeah, not that I'm aware of.
Mr. Plum, do you want to, I mean, I'm kind of looking at that and thinking, well, obviously R2, but both of the recommendations as they stand are picking up on the Castle-Jonas report and effectively agreeing with the Castle-Jonas report, which, given that it was drawn up on behalf of the landowners, is going to be close to their position. The fact that the Castle-Jonas report effectively doesn't support the TPO on TPO 04, would that be problematic as far as the course of action that Councillor Barber is suggesting?
I think in terms of the question raised, you can't just extend the TPO as a temporary order. So you have a provisional order for 6 months and then it's confirmed or not. It might, in that sense, it would be a case of confirming the order with the view that we then arrange access and agree rather than sort of snooping from neighbours' gardens. That would be the other option.
Sorry, on that basis then, if you were to make the order permanent, you still have the ability to invite the landowner to make the access available to you in due course. And if you subsequently find that you disagree with the original rationale for putting the temporary protection order in place, you can then actually, I understand, with agreement, revoke a TPO. So you have the ability to remove it. It's not there forever, cast in stone, and that would at least give you the flexibility of negotiating from a position of strength for access to the land to do the inspection. And that's just my suggestion, Chair.
I'm happy with that as a proposal if people want to amend the recommendation.
Okay, right. So in that case, we would have amended R1, which would mean that we would be confirming TPO 04 and we would also be confirming TPO 5 in R2. I'm guessing since Councillor Barber has proposed that, he would like to move that. I'm happy for him to move it. If he wants to move it, I will happily second it.
If I may, I think it would be more straightforward with the landowner to actually say, and to arrange a visit to review whether it would be revoked in the future. because I think then you're stating the intention of what you're expecting from the landowner, because if you inspect it and you find it doesn't meet the criteria, that's a different matter. But if you can't do the inspection for lack of access, then I think that we have to err on the side of caution.
Seems reasonable from my point of view. Mr. Pumsted said he was happy with what you were previously proposing. Again, I'm happy to, I don't want to steal your thunder in terms of that aspect of things. If you want to move the two recommendations with that change to R1, I'm only too happy to second it. I'm seconding it. Does anybody, we have Roger McShane, you wanted to speak, yeah?
Right, first of all, this is woodland, which can't be developed anyway. So it's immaterial about protecting the trees. And also in the report, it said this is natural regenerated reseeded trees. If we want to actually preserve things, we should actually look at the wood itself. It's growing, it's sorting itself out, rather than protecting one or two trees here and letting the other ones, you let the tree grow and it overshadows the other one and it dies. If you leave it all natural, it will sort itself out. Some big trees will happen, some will fall down. They will feed, or the ones that fall down will feed all the little mites and everything. And it's just a natural regeneration, and we shouldn't interfere.
I'm hearing a very wilder. Councillor Barrett also wants to.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Lowell said, I saw the 4.2 where it does give us carte blanche to do anything we like, it's no appeal process, which is lovely in planning to actually have that for a change. I was going to say in R1, I guess you want to remove the line that says, as evidence confirms it does not meet the standards. We'll remove that. Okay, thank you.
Right, I think that's clarified. So we've now got confirming both TPO 4 for R1 and TPO 5 for R2. That's been moved by Councillor Barber and I've seconded it. And we can, oh yes, it's a show of hands. Yes.
Sorry, Chair. Are we going to include the bit about arranging a visit in R1?
I think that's understood in terms of what we're doing. Basically, it will be looked at, but we will confirm TPO 4 at this point, but we will be looking at the situation going forward. We're not going to be completely unreasonable to the landowners, although in this case the cards are in our hands, which is lovely. So that's where we are, and we can do it on a show of hands.
Oh yeah, against, yeah.
That was against. Councillor Patel, was that a slow hand or was that against?
They're all
yes.
for the only one that was against.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor McShane. I didn't see you as a rewilder, but I'm happy to hear it. Right, this concludes tonight's business. I'm sure